We are here to modify the flavor of the Armor Artificer, meaning that while the Iron Man-esque fantasy is great, what else can we do with the subclass? All to help you create a unique character or NPC and stretch and turn those creative gears. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. Now, before we explore how we will make the Armor Artificer into a divine artifact or skin collector, what does the subclass actually do? Well, you start out with a ton of abilities. You get proficiency in heavy armor and smithing tools, and then you have a number of spells unique to you that is added to your spell list. Then you can turn in armor that you are wearing into arcane armor that allows you to be able to use it as a spellcasting focus. It can't be removed against your will, and you have a retractable helmet. Cool. And it replaces any missing limbs as if you didn't have enough coolness. I hope you guys understand how uncool I felt saying the word coolness. So honestly, most of these have no mechanical significance, so it can be ignored altogether if you want, and it has no impact on the game, which will come in handy with your flavoring in a moment. If that wasn't enough, however, in the same level you get 2 armor forms that can switch every long rest. The Guardian form gives you a Thunder Gauntlet attack and a defensive field that gives you temporary hit points. The Infiltrator form gives you a Lightning Launcher attack, and your walking speed is increased 5 feet, and you get advantage on stealth checks from a dampening field. At higher levels, you can get extra attack and can further boost your arcane armor with multiple Artificer infusions, or power-ups if you will. At the highest level, your Guardian form gives you a magnetic pull to force enemies closer to you, and in your Infiltrator form, creatures hit with your Lightning Launcher attacks now have disadvantage on attacks against you, and the next attack that hits it has a disadvantage as well as deals extra damage. So now that we know the literal mechanics of this subclass, let's see what happens when we change the flavor text in these next 10 character concepts. We can start with maybe the obvious choice with the Bond. An artificer that, instead of being a tinkerer, is imbued with some power of a symbiote. Their armor is one of a living life form, like an ooze or similar creature. But we have used that in a lot of other videos as an example, so let's expand on that. Your bond is with a mimic, that is your personal armor in exchange for a steady supply of food. Or it is a gadabout, a plant-like creature from Spelljammer that helps you breathe. Perhaps you modify it. Or for an undead aesthetic, why not have a boneless wrap itself around you made up entirely of skin? This living skin could be pink like ours, or dragon skin, or furred. Just don't give it a reason to crush you. The same could be said for a dark mantle creature, or a bunch of puppeteer parasites layering you in patches. Ooh, what if a Coatl-like character wrapped itself around you? And now I'm just spitballing ideas, but the premise is that you bond with another creature that doubles as your armor. A great excuse for you to pick up the Find Familiar spell and double your use of this entity. The next flavor modification will be the Crafter, one that leans into their druidic magics or their DIY skills. For those familiar with my Naturecraft Artificer subclass, free on my website, you know what I'm talking about. Your armor being made from plants, trees, vines, bark, or other material that you have foraged instead of forged. Instead of putting together items made out of metal, you make them out of wood. But you may also be in an urban setting where you use trash to make them. On a more magical element, you may use your skills in crafting to make armor made of stone or ice. If we take some elements of our last concept, perhaps it's an elemental that you have bonded with, giving itself as an armor and speaking with you telepathically. Armor made of water or fire that neither wets you or burns you. Harness the power of the natural elements with this concept. And normally the Thunder Gauntlets and the Lightning Launcher has thunder damage and lightning damage respectively, but see if it's okay with your DM to change the damage type for a particular concept. But speaking of druidic elements, you may be familiar with their wild shape transforming into animals. Well, with the Werebeast, you have a partial transformation. Gone is the flavor of armor at all, but instead you get your abilities when you take partial transformation through your lycanthrope or shifter lineage. Your 2 forms instead are 2 different animal forms. Your Guardian form is where your Werebear form that hits with a thunderous punch with its paws, and your Infiltrator form is your Werecat form that makes you lighter on your feet. Of course, you don't need to use those 2 forms exactly, but be creative with the animal forms you specialize in. Could be a Were-Armadillo giving you the defensive field, or your Were-Electric Eel giving you your lightning launcher. then empowering these transformations by adding infusions and abilities to them. In fact, in the Druid class, it states that when you take your animal forms, you absorb all items into your form as well. So maybe when you take partial animal form, you also partially absorb your items. Absorbing a lightning cannon into your arm that replaces one of your were monkey hands, or your breastplate becoming the skin of your were rhino form. Which leads us to our next concept, where I want to focus in on the text. An armorer modifies armor to function almost like a second skin. Well, what if we took that literally? With the non-armor, your armor has become you. Taking heavy inspiration from Dr. Doom, where his skin literally turns into metal, you're not wearing the armor, you are the armor. Perhaps you have been cursed or afflicted with some sort of elemental lycanthropy. That is a weird concept, where you are slowly turning into a creature of metal or stone. In real life, there is a disease called fibrodysplasia, where your tissue inside your body actually turns into bone. And not to make light of the terrible disease that many people suffer from, but in a similar way, your skin could also turn into bone. In a similar vein, we know that the armor replaces any missing limbs. So in essence, you become a cyborg, or a bone borg, or a rock borg, where parts of you are now this other material that you now can look like anything. So what if those parts of you were parts of other creatures? With the Frankenstein, we find a creature spliced together either before or after death. On one hand, you could have been revived by replacing your organs and limbs with other parts of other creatures, a hand of a Behir that shoots lightning, or another hand of an Aeorian reverser with a force punch to kind of go in line with your other abilities. On the other hand, you could have made these modifications yourself, sacrificing your limbs for better ones. Your infusions work in a similar way by adding an eyeball here or a finger there, working to improve yourself with an eldritch form of perfection. If you really like to kind of play with that goriness, I would also check out the Splicer Warlock on my website. If you don't want to completely let go of the mechanical side of things, however, have your Frankenstein monster also integrate mechanical limbs alongside their eldritch ones. In the subclass text, it describes the armor as arcane armor. But what if we take that literally? With the mage armor, we find armor of similar nature to the spell of the same name. You are able to don or doff the armor as an action, so essentially flavor it as casting a spell and covering yourself with an illusory armor or armor made of magic or eldritch energies. As you level up, you are able to tweak the spell and empower it for bonus abilities. The Guardian and Infiltrator armors could be two separate spells that you prepare each day that changes the way that your armor looks. And don't forget that as far as aesthetics go, you could have two completely looking armors for each form from different categories that we've covered. If you want to cast one spell a day for your Guardian form, but then the next day rely on your Boneless to help you give you more of a sneaky Infiltrator form, you could totally do that. But speaking of armor that isn't physical, we see the Mind armor, one that uses psionics to create a buffer and activate abilities, powering your punches with psychic punches and laser beams, telekinetically increasing your movement for being light on your feet, and could seemingly be wearing commoner's clothes, but to the villain's surprise when attacking you, you have a different kind of protection. Maybe even have a shield that telekinetically orbits you as a protective armor. Each of your infusions are your mental powers at work, buffing and aiding your allies and you in the process. But why not have your armor do all of the work, instead of just some of it? With the Jaeger, instead of a regular breastplate and helmet, you are an entire mechanized suit that walks by itself with you in its cockpit. Might be the easiest to play a small creature like a gnome or halfling that plays a medium creature with the suit, but they can jump in and out of this Jaeger and have it follow you around when you're not using it. It just won't be able to take actions unless you are physically inside of it. Also a great excuse for your water-dependent races to be inside their armor that is also filled with water, acting as kind of a land submarine. But you may also find it fun to jump inside inanimate objects in a similar way. Jaeger a large pot as your armor, which is actually taken from a Patreon member of the channel, Kaleidoscope, thank you, as it is their current player or current character that they are playing. If you want to support this channel in a similar way and get inside scoops and help me make videos, you can follow the link to my Patreon in the description below. But other animated objects that you could Jaeger might be a barrel, a wardrobe, a cage, a grandfather clock, or any other fun pieces of furniture that you can give a bit of personality to. Speaking of Jaegering, this could also be stepping inside of a golem. We have the stone golem, iron golem, snow golem, clay golem, or crystal golem. For the next one, we look at the concept I like to call the plot armor. Not because they never die, but because they have a deity invested into their survival. Much like the mage armor concept, a higher being bestows upon you gifts in the form of protective heavenly energies, where motes of light fly around you, or a floating scroll that reads you a celestial protection, warding you and dampening enemy attacks. It could be also that you are given armor made of celestial material covered in divine rites or sigils. I could also see this being like the story of Prometheus, who shaped the race of man out of clay. Perhaps God shaped you out of clay and you take inspiration from the clay golem or elemental ideas that we've discussed before. Or perhaps you got your armor off of a being that was the epitome of law, like a Merit or a Modron. In that sense, the armor that you use doesn't have to be created by you, but rather stolen from another powerful entity, obviously being used as a great plot device. But speaking of creatures from other planes, I give you the positive and the negative. One who draws their magic from polar opposite powers. You may notice from your Guardian form and Infiltrator form that they're two sides of a coin. So what if you draw the healing and power from your Guardian form from the positive planes, and your speed and sneaking from the negative planes? Or another example, your Guardian form from the magic of the Feywild, and your Infiltrator form the magic of the Shadowfell, or the Seelie and the Unseelie court of the Feywild, or just dark and light sides of your own character. Think about the juxtapositions and opposites in your character besides just attack and hide, and you might find a very evocative character. So tell me in the comments about your Artificer characters or ideas. And if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. Creativity is easier for some and harder for others, but like most things, it's a muscle that if exercised, you will get better and better. So speaking of muscle, we will flex that creativity today and explore 10 different ways to reflavor your Totem Warrior Barbarian, taking the animal totem aesthetic and reskinning it to something completely different to create a unique aspect for your next character or NPC. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. But first, our sponsor for today's video, Villainous Champions of the Shadow Keep, a complete campaign setting that lets you play not only an evil character, but the BBEG itself, complete with guides to build and maintain your own secret lair to keep wandering good adventurers out of your business. Whether it be Thieves Guild, Dark Cult, or a group of rebels, guard your treasures and secret artifacts with maze-like halls to populate with triggers and traps. Then hire henchmen or minions to help kill off those pesky adventurers. If that's not all, you will also find rules to play different races and classes, including the Beastman race or the two-headed ogre that is actually played by 2 players instead of 1. Subclasses include the Black Paladin wielding dark forces, or the Soul Shifter that can change their body by possessing a new one. Back the project on Kickstarter, live now until December 10th. Now, before we explore how we will make the Totem Warrior Barbarian into a Demon Slayer or a Psychic Monk, what does the subclass actually do? It begins by giving you the spells Beast Sense and Speak with Animals as ritual spells, and then gives you a choice of animal spirits, each giving you a different ability depending on which one that you choose. The Bear to resist all damage, the Eagle to dash as a bonus action and avoid opportunity attacks, Elk to increase your walking speed, Tiger to add your jump distance, and Wolf to give your friends pack tactics. At level 6, you are able to choose again from this list, but getting different features and choosing a different animal if you want. Bear to increase your carrying capacity and strength checks, Eagle to see up to a mile away, Elk to increase your travel pace, and Tiger for proficiency in a couple extra skills, and Wolf to track and sneak at a faster pace. The next feature gives you the Commune with Nature spell, and then your last feature gives you a choice between totems again. This time the Bear forces disadvantage on attacks against your allies, Eagle gives you limited flight speed, Elk allows you to trample enemies into being prone, Tiger gives you an extra bonus action attack, and Wolf helps you knock your enemies prone when you hit them. With the concept that I like to call the Constellation, we take the flavor from the Circle of the Stars Druid. Instead of animal spirits, they are constellations. Even animal constellations that you invoke when you rage. Your form could even resemble some of these starry forms, just as the Stars Druid does. Channel the power of the horoscopes or astrology. Something like taking Leo as your rising sign and Scorpio as your moon when you level up. I don't know, I'm not an expert on this sort of thing, but I assume it might be fun to figure out which totem might elicit the personalities of different signs. Of course, your beast sense and speak with animals and commune with nature could be more of divination magic or consulting a star chart, or asking the beast the exact time and place that they were born. And then another class might give us flavor inspiration with the Invoker, a barbarian that receives patron gifts instead of spiritual guidance. Each of these abilities they choose at each level are warlock invocations. Not literally, but flavored as such. You get it. But this adding a unique possible warlocky style backstory and a patron without having to multi-class. Instead of Devil's Sight, you get Eagle Sight. Could even be from a Fey patron if you wanted to keep the animal flavor still. But of course your beast sense and speak with animals could also be you reading their mind with Eldritch power from your patron blessing. Or your patron could just possess them and then tell you what they know. Your commune with nature could then be your patron communicating with you as well. With the Historian, we actually get a peek into what an intelligence-focused barbarian might look like as far as flavor goes. A barbarian that pores over books and scrolls to read about former warriors and their fighting styles. Instead of the wolf and elk totem, you copy the skills of Margoth the Conqueror or Aranor the Brave, or even real-life figures like Attila the Hun. What warriors were known for their perseverance, speed, skills, or strength? Your beast sense and speak with animals coming from another warrior that had those skills. Or commune with nature instead being you reading through tomes about the area. But you could also be poring over these books for religious reasons, looking for guidance and boons from gods. Instead of collecting totems, you are actually collecting holy symbols, getting resistance to fire damage from Mistra, god of magic, or a flight speed from Bahamut, the dragon of law. A god of nature, of course, giving you boons to speak with animals and commune with nature, or some god of divination that would do the same. But that leads us now to more of a wisdom-focused barbarian with the mind over matter. Pushing your body to overcome pain and run faster than any other man is no easy feat. But it can be made easier with psionics and meditation, using your brain power to push your boundaries and become faster or see farther. Psionics in previous editions did a lot: telekinesis, telepathy, charm and influence, and other magic. You could even take feats like telekinesis or telepathy to aid this character concept. Read the minds of beasts that you talk to, or expand your mental awareness to commune with nature. On the topic of taking from other classes, you may choose to flavor this a lot like the monk, where instead of a rage, it's more like a trance or a meditative state, which I actually talked more about in my main Barbarian video. Or along the lines of your will pushing the boundaries, you may also try to flavor this like a Paladin, empowering yourself with oaths. And each time you choose the Totem Spirit, you are adopting a new tenet to your oath. This resolve empowering your drive and ambition to your cause. But taking different skills in different places is very iconic for fantasy TTRPGs and even fantasy video games. Perks, feats, skills, abilities, whatever you like to call them, as you gain experience and gain access to special choices to customize your character. So in the same way, we have the skill tree. Your totem spirit options acting in the same way that a skill tree works. What do you want to be better at now, and what do you want to be better at later? Instead of the names of bear or tiger, you just look at it as a dexterity power-up or a perception boon, reflaving your character any other way that you like. If you have a really kind DM, maybe they will even allow you to forgo an ability upgrade at level 6 to instead grab a second ability upgrade at the 3rd level options. The more levels that you grow, the more options that are available to you in the pool. But speaking of upgrades, I am actually looking for a couple more helpers to improve this channel's content creation. Every month, me and my team create a monthly magazine on a variety of topics to stretch the brain and improve the flavor of your games. Character charts, roll tables, brain activities, and more. So we're in need of writers, storytellers, and creators of all kinds. If you're interested, the specifics are on my Discord linked below in the description and outlined in the Scriptorium channels. No previous credentials needed, I just can't wait to create together. If you do want a copy of this month's magazine, all about weather, you can also get that through my Patreon or my website, all linked down in the description as well. But let's get back to it. When it comes to fantasy, anything is possible, and when our fantasy characters have fantasies, it's even more potent. With the Dreamer, we also have the ability to alter their reality in small ways. Let's say in dreams we can run faster, jump higher, take on a different persona, or even fly. This barbarian channels the magic of the dream realm to alter their abilities as such. If they can dream it, they can do it. Instead of rage, they might even fall asleep or be in a dream-like trance, not unlike Zenitsu from Demon Slayer becoming more powerful in this trance. Your beast sense and speak with animals can come to you in the form of dreams or dreamlike sequences, as well as your commune with nature spells. As an added note, it could be dreams or it could be nightmares, and you may not want to channel those things from the plane of dreams. You're faster not to run into something, but run from it. Speaking of scary things though, why do the totems you take have to be animals? With the monster, your totems can come from creatures like dragons or fairies or both. Your movement from an elk totem is instead a quickling totem. Your sight from an eagle totem is instead a beholder totem. And the fun thing about the Totem Warrior Barbarian is that you can take on physical aspects of the totem creature that you take. So give yourself an eye stalk or give yourself bluish skin. If you wanted more of a giant aesthetic, each totem choice could instead be a giant rune of rune magic, activating these runes when you rage. You could get these monster totems as normal, or they could be because you share a bloodline, or even as your favorite enemy, like the Ranger class. You could gain these abilities not because you like them, but because you study them. But let's get back to the bloodline thing for a minute with the Nurtured. We get a barbarian who gets these abilities because of who raised them. This could be either nature or nurture, for those of you familiar with the social argument, where these totemic abilities could come from either yourself, where your bloodline comes from the creature, or you were raised by them. And a simple example of this is if you are an Aarakocra, you gain the eagle totem simply because of your racial nature. Or you could be an orc raised by an Aarakocra, getting eagle totems because of your racial nurture. Your tiger abilities from tabaxi parents, wolf from werewolf parents, or you could even have an elk race in your world and them get their abilities from their elk parents. Or you could just say that your features come from a dwarven heritage and reflavor them that way, possibly just as an extension of your other racial features. But many features of a given person can also be cultural, being a result of the culture that they grew up in. So, with the house, this barbarian gets their skills from growing up in a noble house or certain faction. Much like the Eberron campaign setting, these houses are broken up by dragon marks. While one house is great at herding livestock and animal husbandry, another is great at stealth, intrigue, and assassinations. Depending on the totem you take as a barbarian, it could just be a skill that you learned or perceived through being a part of this familial group. Maybe even being a part of a noble house with the crest depicting a bear, a wolf, or a tiger. Or to make things just a little bit silly, maybe be a part of a Delta Sigma Theta or Alpha Zeta sorority houses that give you perks for being a part of their group, or whatever group patron that might sponsor your adventuring by giving you these perks. But on the more reverent side of things, some households in some cultures do revere a deity or spirit. So with the Guardian, we look to inspiration from cultures around the world. In Chinese culture, you can often find guardian spirits or household deities, entities that watch over the home in general. Mushu from Mulan was technically one of these spirits, and you could even argue the cricket. Also called tutelary deities, they are also a spirit or guardian of a specific place, geographic feature, person, lineage, or occupation, among others. Like demons guarding Thai temples or sphinxes guarding the Great Pyramids. So if you really wanted to bring your own unique quasi-deity into your D&D game, here is your chance. Channel these deities of a house or community to also give a familial touch to a barbarian and bring a totem of this guardian spirit with you. But that is only a few of the plethora of imaginings for your next character. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. So you want to play the Glamour Bard. You want to charm the pants off of other creatures and be the top that you never knew you could. Or you want to take a different spin and make a bard, dare I say, that's not as horny as the memes make it out to be. But what if instead of charming, you were intimidating and dabbled in a little illusion magic? Let's explore different character ideas for your Glamour Bard and give you your own mantle of inspiration. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. But before we get started here, I want to give a huge shout out to a longtime friend of the channel, the Dungeon Coach. He just released the biggest project on his channel through Kickstarter, Alkander's Almanac of All Things. This video is not sponsored by him, but I just wanted to promote his work as I think it's incredible and just as a big thank you for helping me with my own YouTube journey. What you will find is a 220-page expansion to D&D 5th edition, including alternate exploration rules, weapon mechanics, mass combat, rest systems, death and resurrection methods, and more. Not to replace all of your current 5e rules, but to mix and match and find better alternatives to a few things that maybe could be a little bit better. I just got my copy myself and I can't wait to implement them. You can find the link to his website linked into the description below, and I think you only have until July 31st to get a hard copy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dungeon Coach, but hey, time's limited anyways. Now, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Glamour Bards take on magical forms from the magic of the Feywild. You can start with a wondrous appearance that gives your allies temporary hit points and free movement. You can then perform for a minute and charm everyone in the immediate vicinity. Next, take on an unearthly beauty that gives you a rapid-fire command spell. Then, at later levels, you use your charm as a ward, messing with others' ability to hit or dodge you. But now that we know what the abilities are, how can we reflavor them to give a unique spin to your character? I hope to enthrall all of you with these next 10 different character concepts. With the Phantasmal Glamour Bard, they use illusions to charm the enemy. Just like the spell Phantasmal Force, it is made to believe in a certain reality or immediate event. The thing is, instead of your bard taking on a form that everyone can see, you take on a form that only they can see because you put it into their mind. In their mind's eye, they see you transform and are immediately influenced by it. Heck, you could have been doing some snooping in the memories beforehand and made yourself look like someone that they knew. Everyone else around is wondering why this person is treating you so differently. But this phantasmal image in their mind could also be a whole reality or landscape, making them believe a certain way, much like Mysterio in the Spider-Man movie would surround people with his illusions. But speaking of schools of magic, you can explore another character concept with the Enchanter. Instead of a bard from a college, you would flavor one much like a wizard from the enchantment school. Instead of a 1-minute performance to charm people, it would be a 1-minute ritual, perhaps complete with a glyph circle and components. Perhaps the enemy thinks that you're trying to cast a healing spell or something to help them rather than hinder them, or something more creative to help them not be weary of the actions that you're taking. Maybe a kind DM might waive the requirement for some people to actually have to watch the entire time. So if you do it successfully in a crowd, you may have sneakily gotten away with the ritual. Some of your mantle abilities could also work with the Abjuration School of Magic that deals with defensive spells. Perhaps you are a double major. But another form of magic is outside the normal 8 schools of magic, would be Potions class. The Love Potion is pretty self-explanatory, as your charming abilities are something that you can make inside a bottle. Your speciality is fast-acting splash potions, as you quickly throw a few ingredients together into a vial, shake it up, and then slam it into the ground with a puff of pink smoke. You can even flavor many of your spells this way if you do. Your mantles being replaced by specific potion concoctions. Perhaps you lock yourself in a room with a noble for 1 minute to mix an enthralling performance splash potion to charm them before the guards break down the door. And if you really want to play matchmaker, maybe your fellow players would allow you to mess with their characters from time to time, of course if you see a good ship. But something to note is that the Glamour Bard doesn't just have one transformation that they undergo, they actually have 3. A wondrous appearance, an unearthly beauty, and a majestic presence. Each of them doing different things as you earn each one as you level up. So with the triple threat, we look at the 3-form idea. Some other subclasses with 3 forms might include the Totem Barbarian or the Stars Druid. Perhaps you have totems of a horse and a butterfly that charms people, or you undergo a starry form like the constellation Cassiopeia. Take some inspiration from monsters like the Chimera, your snake form, your goat form, and your lion form, or be the living representation of the Sphinx riddle with 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening. You could also be collecting these forms as you go, like an Eladrin that only is in one form of summer, and in order to get their form of spring, fall, and winter, they must adventure for them. Get 3 Kitsune tails for each form like Naruto, or 3 Pokemon evolutions. Obviously, I'm just spitballing here, but just have some fun and get creative. But on the lines of different forms, let's explore a few races that also have different transformations. With the lineage, we see races like the Aasimar with a celestial transformation. Perhaps your charm is more of a divine, awe-inspiring visage. Another one would be the Shifter, be a Lycan of a beautiful animal that causes people to stare. Or a Changeling, the epitome of transformation. Transform into the essence of beauty, or whatever the beauty is to the eye of the beholder. Again, you could do some mind reading or research beforehand to make yourself look like a loved one. This could also work with races that have less of a transformation and more of the charm baked in, be it a vampire with the Dampier or a hag with the Hexblood. In these cases, your charm coming from a monstrous lineage. But let's continue on that route. With the monster, your blood can come from sirens or harpies that have magic backing up their performances of song. Learn different songs as you level up with your 3 forms. You could also learn hypnosis ability from Kelpies, or how to mimic the voices of other people's loved ones like a hag, a cackler, or a kenku, or be a campestry-based myconid. There are many examples in folklore about strange, familiar voices luring people to their deaths, and these abilities could also come from an incubus or a succubus. Charm them with a kiss and a temptation. But of course, you don't need to be evil if you come from like an evil hag background. Take inspiration from the movie Nanny McPhee. I'm not sure how obscure this movie reference is, but think of a hag inspired by Mary Poppins if you haven't seen it. But in the movie, as she helps the children, she slowly loses her large nose and warts. Perhaps as you help others, your visage is changed in a similar way. But there are also monsters in the real world that take on forms to lure and fool mankind. With the cryptid, take inspiration from these creatures as well. We have the Jorogumo, a goblin in Japanese culture that transforms into a beautiful woman. Good thing the goblin race is an option. But this Jorogumo can also be a half-spider woman, so tie in the drow. If you take inspiration from the Sehuinaba, a Central American spirit that reveals themselves as a beautiful woman as they lure people into danger, but revealing their horse-like or skull-like head at the very last second. Similarly deceived, people who follow deer women into the forest from Native American culture might find their head stomped on by their hooves. But these cryptids don't always have to be in feminine forms. The Encantados from the Amazon are essentially masculine were-dolphins. There are endless cryptid and folkloric stories, so go find some fun ones. But let's go even bigger. With the Glamour Bard, you normally get magic from the Feywild, the plane of Fey, but what if you were the Fey? The Archfey. In other videos, I've talked about how being a celestial could work, falling to earth and losing some of your power, so why couldn't that work with Archfeys as well? Perhaps when they transferred from the Feywild to the material plane, they forgot everything. They forgot who they were, what power they held, or their power is literally weakened in a world where no one upholds their court. Maybe in that case, you remember everything, and you constantly talk about how good you had it when you were royalty within the Feywild. On the other end of the spectrum, let's say that you are just a regular adventurer, but your normalist is inspiring. The himbo charms people not on purpose, but other people can't help but admire them and see their heart as they wear it on their sleeve. They charm people with their bulging muscles, idiotic ambition, and heroic attitude. They give 1-minute speeches that, while a little egotistical, is still very charming. I also have a Path of the Charmer Barbarian that hones in on this trope on my website, which you can check through the link in the description. But personally, I think himbos can be swordsmen and spellcasters. Himbo is more of a way of life rather than an occupation. But another type of adventurer prefers to use their charisma not to persuade or deceive, but to intimidate. With the Intimidator, they don't use sweet words to trick people into doing what they want. Instead, they use force by threats to do so, but a threat backed by charismatic magic. A bit of a bossy character that can maybe benefit a party with no leader, but they know what they want and they won't take no for an answer. But this character might take on scary forms as well, be it a mask, or a unique use of the thaumaturgy cantrip, or some other magical phenomena to make them a little more scary. And at higher levels, their intimidation makes people think twice about attacking them. So let me know how you would flavor the Glamour Bard. Comment anything that you feel that I've missed. Hopefully we can continue to build new ideas together and stretch our creative wings. Loki, the Norse god of mischief. Hermes, the troublemaker of the Greek. Anansi of Achen folktale. Kokopelli of the Native American Southwest, Puck of English folklore, or the Kitsune of Japanese tales. All manifestations of trickery, troublemaking, and misbehavior, and a perfect fit for your Trickery domain cleric.
This is trickery. This is low, conniving trickery.
As this trickster, you are an unruly patron of thieves, scoundrels, gamblers, rebels, and liberators. When it comes to clerics, they epitomize irreverence.
If you want to take a beat to acknowledge the sacred atmosphere, it could give the cynical grave robbing a hint of irreverence.
No, I'm good.
All right then, let's loot this corpse.
However, the subclass of the Trickery domain cleric might prove useful to create a completely different flavor of character as well. For we are here to reskin and reflavor the mechanics of this cleric to one that might be more comfortable manipulating space, time, or even simply being a Disney princess. Hello Acolytes, this is the Cleric Corner, and here is another episode of the Better Class series, to pump new blood and ideas into subclasses you may have already played, and can now create something entirely different. So, I hope you came prepared to think outside of the box, and just like last time, if you stay to the end, expect something for free to expand on one of these 10 character concepts. But first, the mechanics. Starting with a very flavorful spell list, including Charm Person, Disguise Self, Mirror Image, Pass Without Trace, Blink, Dispel Magic, Dimension Door, Polymorph, Dominate Person, and Modify Memory. Spells that deal with deception, sneaking, slipping away, and removing evidence. Also at first level, you can grant any one person advantage on dexterity checks for an hour. At second level, you can invoke a duplicate of yourself that you can move around and shoot spells out of as if they were in your space, or you were in theirs. At 6th level, you can cloak yourself with invisibility in a moment of need, and at 8th level, you get extra poison damage on your weapon attacks. And then finally, at 17th level, you can create 4 duplicates of yourself instead of just 1.
Did you get all that?
Now that's a lot to play with, but the great thing about spellcasters is that you can prepare a variety of spells to fit your specific flavor of character. But one thing that will of course be a focus on this reflavor is its duplication feature, which you actually might find familiar from another video I did over a year ago. The Echo comes from the flavor of Echo Knight, a critical role created subclass that revolves around the fighter that uses the magic of Dunamancy to summon alternate versions of themselves to the battlefield. Alternate timelines with small variances that eventually fade from the sacred timeline. Very Loki and Marvel Universe kind of vibe. Instead of just creating an illusion of yourself, I know, so boring, you are calling upon an alternate version of yourself or even a past or future version of yourself. You are a walking paradox, but where you have the Time Fighter, you now have the Time Cleric. And if you want a Time Sorcerer, you can also find that one in my Patreon shop. Same deal. I might even get around to creating the rest of them someday. I like the idea of just having a time or a paradox focus of all the classes, but I actually covered the Echo Knight in its own entire video where I covered angels, ancestors, portals, and alternate personalities. But because of the similarities, you can go watch that video after this one and apply the same flavors there to the cleric here. But I wanted to expand even more ideas, so my aim was to make all of these cleric concepts unique, so you can then include them over there as well. Can you tell this is my favorite cleric subclass yet?
I'm obsessed.
It's also really interesting that just after the Echo Knight video, I just hit my 10,000 subscriber mark, and probably right after this one, I'll meet my 20,000 subscriber mark. So hey, woohoo, we all did it, guys. Good job. Now, the split focuses on a specific set of creatures that have an uncanny ability to split themselves into 2. One of the most common are oozes. Very fitting for an ooze-born or a plasmoid race being able to split itself apart and cast spells in 2 different places, much like a symbiote or parasite if you go that direction.
Yes, we are splitting up.
A doppelganger in some iterations can multiply as well for a great changeling race, or you're some sort of creature that sheds its skin. I don't know, go with it. And your dead skin shell kind of acts of its own accord for a time. You also have a displacer beast that makes an illusion of itself, that would be cool. Perhaps you are a unique race of tabaxi based on this six-legged cat. Another option is to be made of construct materials, warforged, made of mud, stone, plants, or even bones or flesh, sloughing off some of themselves to create two smaller parts of themselves. Even be more of a mech or cyborg that takes off a portion of their mechanics to fight separately in a turret-like fashion. And this would also be a great place for your 3 kobolds in a trench coat, or 2 gnomes, or 2 of any assortment of small races you can fit inside a large jacket. And you know the coolest thing about this is even maybe create your own race or creature that has the ability to split. You are free to comment all of your fantastic ideas. The dualism dives into the realm of a single word, duality. Duality being the opposition or contrast between 2 aspects of something. For example, you have wet and cold, light and dark. And to represent that duality, you have yourself and your duplicate, good and evil, happy and sad, summer and winter, outgoing and reserved.
Every version of me.
Perhaps you play your duplicate as the person you wish you could be, or who you view yourself as. For a prideful character, their duplicate could look much more handsome and powerful than they actually are.
I'm just the best version of myself again.
For a more insecure character, their duplicate could be some sort of monster, or even something that they are scared of. It becomes a literal reflection of the character and their progress through the campaign. What they see when they look in a mirror. For more duality, a Fey character might see their Shadowfell counterpart, a Celestial creature might see their Devilish counterpart. A character of Order might see their Chaotic counterpart. You see the picture. Fire, water, earth, sky, I think you get the idea. But when it comes to the projections of the mind, I think we can expand it even further. The manifestation brings in perspective to your duplicate, for they are the manifestations of your dreams, desires, or your fears and emotions. On one hand, your duplicate could be who you imagine yourself becoming. They are what success looks like to you when you complete all of your desired ambitions. As a character, what does that even look like? It's a question that all players should be asking themselves about their characters at the very beginning. This cleric just brings it to the forefront. What is the thing that your character desires the most? That is what their duplicate looks like, and it may not even be themselves. Then on the other hand, their duplicate might be their greatest fears, manifesting themselves as their mind is projecting that insecurity. A great way to put those roleplay struggles out in the open, where normally they might be in the background. Perhaps it is a suppressed emotion of rage, despair, terror, all of which are so powerful that they take physical form. So when you connect a projector to the subconscious of your character's mind, what appears before them? Perhaps they don't even know. And that is a secret that only the DM can reveal. But I like this subconscious stuff, so let's do one more. The imaginary friend is a more purposeful manifestation of the mind. It is a mental construct created for a purpose, the imaginary friend being one of those possibilities. By the time you're watching this, the movie If is out, and all of a sudden you have a plethora of inspiration for different kinds of imaginary friends. But similarly to a work of imagination is a work of art. Perhaps you paint or graffiti your duplicate into existence, having creative liberties each time you manifest them and peeling a 2D character off from the wall. Perhaps you sing them into existence, either making a duplicate out of the colors of the wind or animating an object Creation Bard style. Do you have tattoos, photographs, ornate stitchings in your clothes? Watch them leap off their canvas and become your living art. But speaking of art, sometimes what you see or hear is just as important as what you smell. So when you play D&D with all your friends, you may have a super beautiful map, you may have incredible ambience music, but do you have a symphony of smells to immerse you in a dwarven mine? If not, you should definitely level up with Wicked Warlock handmade candles. With smells like Tavern, Elven City, and Dragon's Lair, you have an incredible assortment of scents to fade out all the smell of Doritos and nerd body odor. We've all been there, guys. But I actually have a professional on the scene here, folks, to give you a live react. Someone who, ever since I married, can smell a grain of rice from across the house and tell you exactly how old water is. My wife! Which one do you want to smell first?
Elven City.
Dip down a little bit further so they can see your reaction.
That's nice.
Ooh.
Tiny.
Almost, yeah, Christmassy.
Okay, this one is Dwarven Mine. That was nice too. It's just very earthy.
The swarthy, earthy, sensual worker.
We like earthy things.
We do like earthy things.
And then Tavern is the last one. I smelled this one from like as soon as I opened it, I smelled the waft. It's like caramel.
It is caramely.
Which, so do you have a favorite?
Pine, then this one, then the last one.
Elven
Whatever
City's the
pine.
best one.
In my opinion.
In the professional's opinion. The professional's opinion.
Should I go light it?
Yeah, you should go light it. I didn't bring a...
Well, none of us thought we were gonna do that, right?
I didn't bring a lighter.
Okay, so the best part is it has a wooden wick.
Whoa.
Ooh, should we get a little ASMR? Sometimes they have a... What? No. Okay, wanna blow it out? Thanks. So there you have it, folks. That was my wife's debut on the channel, actually. So everyone give her a good job in the comments below. And if the product itself isn't enough, you can also get 21% off their best-selling bundles with the link in the description below. Thank you, Wicked Warlock, for sponsoring this video. But now let's leave the arts behind, trade wisdom for intelligence, and use the left side of our brain for a bit more. The Simulacrum comes from a very famous wizard spell that creates a false duplicate of ice and snow. As a 7th level spell, it is very powerful as you create something that essentially acts as its own person with its own spell slots and abilities. So with your intelligence, you have figured out a quicker and easier way to create Simulacrum of yourself, or base it off the 8th level spell Clone, making it literally a quick cloning technology akin to Rick and Morty.
You're just made in my image.
Perhaps do it Artificer style, where you chuck a vial on the floor and the liquid expands and solidifies into a new version of you. Cut off a finger and throw it on the ground, and it regenerates in a similar way. One of my favorite races of D&D, the Riggers, a cephalod-like spelljammer race with glowing halos, have something called a Talarith, a magical object that allows themselves to duplicate themselves. Seems pretty on brand. My wife actually plays a Rigger in our spelljamming home game that we record in a live play. Both the Rigaran race stats and the whole campaign, going on 60 episodes at this point, are available for Patreon members if you wish to check it out or support the channel. What kind of other magical or sciencey shenanigans can you think of? Well, I can think of one more. We talked about the turret as a concept in the Echo Knight video, but that being Martial, we needed an arcane equivalent. So the arcane turret is based off of a certain area in my Baldur's Gate 3 run that took me too many hours and save scums to get through. An area that, in order to get into a tower, you have to walk past arcane cannons that blasted you to the 9 hells if you weren't behind total cover. Needless to say, create your own floating arcane cannon that you can shoot your spells around corners and over rocks. But this single point of power could be a variety of things besides a constructed piece of arcane metal. It could be a mote of divinity or celestial object that embodies your heavenly powers. Perhaps this is a source of your magical power instead of a deity. It could also purely be a magical orb or orb of chaos that you conjure out of the air, and the spells you cast are random effects that spiral out of the enigma. Maybe some sort of planar hole that sucks the magic from another plane that it's connected to. Again, could be coming from you or an item you hold. But items sometimes have more than just magic. They have personalities. Ever pick up a sentient magic item on your adventures? An item that has a soul, or its own personality, or is connected to some other intelligence? We are talking Sword of Caste level stuff. A vampire soul possessing the sword it once wielded, for example. However the item or personality comes about, let's say that you have the ability to pull them out of said weapon or item. You can now pull Cass himself from the sword and use his spirit as a temporary conduit for your magic. This magical item could be someone you don't know, or it could be someone you did. An old mentor that passed on a wand to you, as well as his spirit to guide you. Perhaps you are on an adventure to uncover these items, to collect the souls of certain organization or team, and get back the knowledge that went with them. Were they ancient prophets or powerful mages? Collect them all and see what they would have looked like. But speaking of collecting things, the flock likes one thing: familiars. A rat, raven, cat, or frog, you may have a selection of little fey creatures that you can choose at your command. Very Pokemon-esque as you throw out a duplicate and shout, "I choose you," and your pseudo-dragon with fire on its tail appears to cast your spells. This is also your Disney princess, as with later levels you can summon multiple duplicates at one time, sing a song and coax a wild animal into making a dress, or pulling your carriage. In a more druidic flavor, you could be summoning or animating plants around you. You can even look at other sources of media for familiar ideas. Be a Ratchet to your Clank, or Link to your Navi, or Crash Bandicoot to your Aku Aku, or Spyro to your Sparks, but there are similar iconic pairings within the world of D&D as well. The minion gives you a taste of the meal all your boss monsters are eating. For example, a very well-known minion of a legendary dragon, or the kobolds that have taken up residence in the caves around their lair. Perhaps you are a dragonborn with a kobold that has been taking a liking to you, giving you a representational dynamic of the bigger thing. Another dynamic could be a kraken and their deep scion slaves. Perhaps you are the kraken priest borrowing one of your patron's grunts. I did a short recently about this. Apparently there are a lot of you who don't know that krakens have slaves, so there you go. But also summon a warg as a goblin race, or a flaming skull or zombie as a necromancer, an intellect devourer as a mind flayer, or imps as a tiefling, or summon fairies as an elf or fae. Perhaps your duplicate is just a swarm of insects or similar flavor to what you would apply to the Swarmkeeper Ranger, or maybe a homunculus, or you may just have a pocket manservant, being a noble or highborn, or you have a domestic servant that you can summon at will, much to their terror when they appear in front of Cthulhu. But you pull them back to wherever they were just as they were about to take damage. And incredibly, there are infinitely more ideas when you combine all of your creativity and imagination. So let me know your machinations in the comments below. So you want to play the Circle of Stars Druid, but what will your character look like? You can go the regular Starry Sky flavor, but what if you changed it up? What if instead of stars you took the forms of ghostly possessions, or channeled the runic magic of giants? Let's map out some new ideas to make your next Druid character truly unique. After all, the sky is never the limit. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. Now, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Star Druids are stargazers that harness the power of heavenly bodies and constellations. You have a star chart as a spellcasting focus that allows you to cast spells like Guidance and Guiding Bolt. Then, as a use for your wild shape, you can access the power of certain constellations, either giving you a ranged spell attack with the Archer, extra healing power as the Chalice, and advantage on concentration checks in your dragon form. You then get a Wheel and Woe feature that either gives you a boon to attack rolls, saving throws, or ability checks, or gives the enemy a bane to those checks, all depending on what your omen roll is that morning. As you level up, your star forms get strengthened, including a flying speed in your dragon form, and you can change between them on every turn. Then lastly, you are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage while in your form. A constant powerhouse from level 1 to 20. Now, a Druid of the Stars is already a unique and evocative flavor for an otherwise plant-like Druid. But now that we know what the mechanics are, how else can we reflavor and subvert it to see what other story possibilities are available? So keeping with the same mechanics, let's explore 10 alternate character concepts to stretch your creative thinking. First up is actually one that I played relatively recently in a one-shot, the Ghost. When you think of different forms your druid can turn into, it's fun to think of other creatures and phenomena that they can tap into to create similar results. So instead of constellations, we look at the ethereal undead. Your starry map is instead a gravesite roster, keeping track of persons who have not passed on. You getting to tap into these undead via symbiotic possession. Your archer form is instead a poltergeist, your chalice a ghost or starlight apparition, and your dragon is a banshee, or whatever other creature you let possess you. My druid that I played let a dragon ghost possess them for a draconic transformation spell. Your wheel and woe abilities could be those spirits influencing those you choose, and the fly speed and resistance to physical damage is self-explanatory as you go somewhat ethereal. But you can also tap into living creatures as well with the animal. Either having a menagerie of spirit animals or a type of genetic lycanthropy, your forms could be a monkey flinging radiant poop, an elephant showering healing water from their trunk, and an intelligent crow giving you a bonus to concentration and a fly speed. Instead of a star map, you have a bestiary or encyclopedia. Your wheel and woe is animal instincts, and your hide thickens at like a rhino at later levels. Have a specific animal for each form you take, or switch it up on how you feel. As long as the mechanics work the same, it shouldn't matter. But this being closer to the classic nature of the druid, what if we just restore the classic plant-like tropes of the class? With the plant, we like the mechanics of the subclass, but we change the starry map into a herbarium, or a book of plants. As for your ranged radiant attacks, the recent Spelljammer book gave us Artux, which are plant creatures that shoot radiant pellets. Your druid can do the same. Now, the Star Druid is perfect for any Spelljammer campaign with its starry nature, but Artux don't need to be from a Spelljammer in your world. Wheel and woe could be reading tea leaves, and even at later levels you might adopt barkskin towards you and a large helicopter leaf to keep you flying. But while we're at it, let's explore some other nature-based magics that you can take your forms from. The first being the weather, a druid that uses a magical barometer to prepare for weather and gain advantage against their foes. There are many factors in the ozone that can influence a battle. Your archer could be a static charge from a storm, your chalice could be a sunny day, and your dragon could be a high wind that can eventually lift you. At later levels, you can take on more of a cloudy form to gain resistance to physical damage. And actually, speaking of, what if your forms were stratus, cumulus, or cumulonimbus clouds, having a domain of that entire layer of the world? But what if your druid, being of nature, could tap into every layer of the world? Nature in every form, both above and below the crust of the earth. Or like they could tap into the stars, what if they could tap into the planet or planets themselves? With the planet, we find a druid that has a magical seismograph to predict omens, and their forms include an atmospheric form, a surface form, and a planetary core form. Have fun with what these forms look like, whether it be the clear blue skies and the iron core of the earth, or the stormy atmosphere and metallic hydrogen core of planets like Jupiter. But speaking of all this planetary influence, what if your character was influenced by a black hole, a nebula, a wormhole, or space-time itself? I want to help you all be more creative and provide you with resources to easily stretch your mind and flavor your characters. So if you haven't already, check out our latest issue of Higher Powers magazine, where we went over all things space and Spelljammer to do just that, going over all elements of space to power your characters or populate your campaigns. Free for Patreon subscribers, or you can find them on my website, all linked below. Hope it helps. But let's get away from nature already. Let's get a little more crazy with these starry druid reflavors. In fact, let's give them a little taste of every other class. With the absurd, you can switch between arcane, druidic, and divine focuses. Absurd being a fun concept coined by Puffin Forest of a character that multiclass in every class. Except in this reflavor, no multiclassing is necessary. Your archer form is quite literally you having learned a skill from the ranger class, your chalice is your clerical form, and your dragon would be your wizard form. Even your wheel and woe could now work like bardic inspiration, and your resistance to physical damage is a skill that you took from a barbarian. You are a menagerie of skills and abilities either took from your party members or purposefully trained in attempt to avoid the hassle of multiclassing. Or you are channeling past adventurers that give you these boons, those that have stayed behind to help you accomplish what they could not. But let's dive into the flavor of a clerical druid a bit more. With the Devoted, you channel your magic not from one, not two, but 3 different gods. Your archery form is channeling boons from the god of archery, Uller, or Apollo. Your chalice form channels the god of healing, Pelor, and then your dragon form channels boons from Mistra, the god of magic. Each of them either having rewarded you from past actions or invested in you for your current goal. Or you have time to worship and be a cleric of each individual, praying for your weals and woes. Your star charts are, of course, scripture from each god, but of course they don't need to be those 3 specific gods. Choose from yourself which gods to pull from. even evil ones. Another fun class to pull from is the Artificer, so with the apparatus, you either use magic stored in items or switch between different contraptions that you choose. I could even see like a telescopic kaleidoscope that as you turn the dial, runes line up and they spell out incantations and effects. Telescopic, kind of keeping the starry aesthetic, of course. Maybe even having a construct made of a living telescope with one eye extending outwards and an eyepiece that someone could look through at the back of their head. I don't know, that would just be really fun to me. But your star maps are blueprints and you add on different technical pieces that give you the ability to fly or defend yourself. But speaking of runes, I would be remiss to dismiss rune magic, especially from giants. With the Rune Druid, your magic comes a lot like the Rune Knight Fighter. Runes from giants that give you access to the magic of the ordning. Throw radiant rocks like a hill giant, and scribe healing runes into crystals to boost your healing. Your flight could come from Storm Giant runes, or resistance from physical damage from a Stone Giant rune. You can flavor all of your spells in a similar way as well. We have not yet had a Circle of Giants Druid, though I actually should work on something like that soon. That'd be pretty cool. But this does well for flavor in the meantime. As a flavor tip, it is often useful to go through different classes and monsters to see how your abilities can relate to them. Does it make sense to source your magic from them? And yet another influence would be the many planes of existence. So let's talk about the court. Taking a lot of its flavor from the Circle of Dreams Druid, where you find magic from the Seelie and Unseelie courts of the Feywild. Weal and Woe coming quite literally from those two juxtaposed courts, or have access to both at once that gives you flight speed and better concentration. Your resistance to damage at higher levels reflavored as Fey Slipperiness. Your forms could even reflect some creatures like the Dryad, the Hag, or a Pixie. So what does your forms look like? Where do you draw your power? Let me know in the comments below. Shoot for the moon and you'll land amongst the stars. So you want to play the Echo Knight Fighter, but are looking for new ideas to make your character truly unique. Hey, what? Have you started telling them about the different Echo Knight Fighters that they can play? Well, as you can see, we're about to. Well, are you going to tell them about how to reflavor them into Devil Summoners or have Guardian Angels? Whoa, hey, hold on. Spoilers. I promise we will get to that. Well, just like the Echo Knight, we will explore unrealized realities and create characters that no one has thought of yet. Wait, hold on, who summoned you? That's my... Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. I've dismissed my friend for now, but just so that we're on the same page, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Echo Knights have the ability to tap into their alternate selves from other realities, plucking energy from a failed multiverse versions of themselves in order to fight alongside of them. Their features include being able to, of course, summon this Echo, being able to attack from its space instead of yours, and being able to teleport back and forth. Other interactions include you being able to see through its eyes and sending it off to do reconnaissance, and also it throwing its own self as a sacrifice and getting hit instead of a party member. You can also absorb it in order to get temporary hit points, or eventually being able to summon multiple versions of yourself. However, we're not here just to talk about potential selves. This is only just one flavor that we can put on top of these mechanics. We're going to take another direction and see what else we can reflavor and subvert. So what other possibilities are there? Let's go over 10 concepts for the Echo Knight for your characters and your NPCs. Starting with the Possessed, we find an Echo Knight that doesn't tap into energy from other worlds, but otherworldly creatures tap into them. Perhaps a Banshee or a Ghost is possessing you, either in half or in full, and their unfinished business is akin to your drive or your goal. If it is a relationship, it could be very tenuous until you eventually complete what you both set out to do. So in this case, it would be a mutualistic endoparasite. Those are big words. I feel smart. This could also be a group or a legion of ghosts that are now possessing you, and you send one of them out as your Echo. Or perhaps you are the ghost playing inside the body because you're possessing it, and the body only gets liberated or has some free time with you outside of it when you summon yourself as the Echo. And at the end of the fight, you put the body back into possessed mode and you continue on with the day. In fact, going forward, it might be interesting to think about all of these ideas in if you were the Echo Knight or you played the Echo. For example, what if what comes out of you is an ooze-like creature or an aberrational alien parasite? The alien bursting from your chest only to climb back in painfully later, and then something about this creature keeps you from dying this way. Or you're an Obelix, or come from an Obelix, and something cool about them is that they are an ooze that can siphon off some of themselves and shape it to become humanoid. Are you the Echo Knight, or are you the ooze? Are you the Echo Knight, or are you the parasite? Ooh, but actually something I mentioned recently in a live stream would be, instead of ghosts possessing you, what about devils or demons? The character I talked about had 7 imps that have somehow possessed their body, each of them representing one of the 7 deadly sins. And when they would summon their echo, they would actually summon one of these imps, being able to pull them out of themselves for a temporary time. However, when they do so, they then take on properties of that deadly sin that one imp represented. Maybe rolling a d8 or something to figure that out. For example, they might summon the imp Greed, and now they have to take on the act of looting the bodies and taking everything inside. But on the same note, it could be a single demon or devil that's inside of you and almost act like a patron figure. They could be tempting you to do mischievous or wrongful things. Or in fact, even better, you could also have some angelic creature also possessing your body and have both the shoulder devil and the shoulder angel in play. But if you're going more the celestial route, maybe the guardian angel Echo Knight is more your style. You were blessed by the gods and have a herald watching over you, and whenever you need their aid, you pray in order to summon them. The great thing about your Echo is that they can move in every direction, meaning that they technically have a flying speed, and perhaps even a burrowing speed? But give it wings and make it look like an Archon or a Planetar. But your guardian angel could also just be an ancestor, perhaps a recently deceased one, a brother or a sister or a father or a mother. Or it could be an ancient ancestor that's died 1,000 years ago and mostly forgotten, and they were chosen in order to help you in your noble quest. Or perhaps this ancestor guides each and every generation down to you, passing from father to son or mother to daughter. Or your ancestors just didn't get the memo and sent a dragon familiar instead. And I could also see this being more like a fairy godmother vibe, but like a martial version, I guess? Like, what would a fairy godmother look like if she had a breastplate and sword? She's done her squats. Grandma's got back. But still obviously there to help you in a fight when you summon her, but also there to be as a roleplay guide and help you with decisions in your future. So if you see any Echo Knights out there with glass slippers, you know where they got the idea. But this grandmother obviously could be hereditary, or it could just be some ancient spirit from the Feywild. Or what would be really interesting is if it was an ancestor to somebody else, and they had to come to you in order to save their grandchild that somehow got into trouble. Or it could be a spirit of an adventurer who was on your same quest, but failed and is now coming back to help you across it. Hey everybody, Editing Riker here. Problems in post with the sound kept me from giving you this one extra idea that I just had to include. Because what makes a better guardian angel than a genie? You rub a lamp or a relic in order to summon your genie into the fight, and perhaps this was one of your wishes to get them to fight for you and to protect you. You could have 2 other wishes that you could play with if your DM is kind, or if the DM just doesn't want to deal with that, they could say that the last wish was the one to have them protect you. So the genie is just fulfilling that wish until you die, and in the grand scheme of things, your lifetime versus their lifetime, it's not much of a wait. But back to the rest of the video. But maybe instead of past ancestors, the person that you call upon is your past self. We know that the Echo Knight usually pulls from other realities, but what would it look like if you pulled yourself from this one? With the Time Traveler, you obviously play with time, summoning either your past self or your future self into the present to fight alongside you. Perhaps each time you summon your future self, they have more and more scars, hauntingly foreshadowing things to come. Perhaps there is even an age limit that you can pull from, either that you can only pull your future self from 5 years up, or that there's a certain age that you can't pull from, also foreshadowing your death. You being able to pull only your 35-year-old self, meaning that you won't make it to 36. On the other end, if you pull from your past self, perhaps that brings up a lot of memories for you. Perhaps that time of your life was very chaotic and very traumatic. When you summon them, you remember what you were doing at that age. It could be that during that time you were working for the other team, and whenever you're pulling your past self, you have to hide it from them that you're now working for the good one. But now here's the kicker. This would be perfect for the player that is often too busy to make it to every session, and you need some sort of excuse for their character to take a leave from time to time. Because just as you can pull from your past self and your future self, they can pull on you for aid. This character could be gone for minutes, hours, or even days in helping in another time. And then once the player eventually gets to a point where they can come to a session again, you can have them come back as catching up to the party. But now continuing with the theme of alternate selves, what if all of your selves were in the present? Now I really hope not to be insensitive to the DID community, but with the rise of Moon Knight and similar characters, I think it would be really interesting to play with the Alter Echo Knight. You team up with the alternate versions of yourself in order to accomplish a collective goal. Each time you summon your Echo, you're allowing another alter to take over the body as you astral project out of it. You might need to be careful though, because there might be some alters that one, you're unaware of, and two, some that are going against your current goal. You could play this antagonist alter yourself, lying to the party and even coming off as a different alter than you are, or you can let the DM decide what this one does while you're sleeping. You coming to the forefront randomly in the middle of the night, miles away from your party. You might find out and start making precautions, putting a ball and chain on your feet while you sleep, or like the film, putting a sand ring around your bed. I just love the roleplay possibilities and the interactions not unlike the film Moon Knight. And you know what would be really fun is actually giving out some of these alter identities to your other players. And that as you play the host and interact with some of these alters, you're actually role-playing with one of them. But along kind of the same lines as alternate selves, I want to bring up an inspiration from a Spider-Man villain, Mr. Negative. And I just think it would be fun to, when you summon your Echo, it's just the inverted colors of what you are. Now, this next one is very arguable whether it is you or just another entity of itself. At least the film never says it, whether it is or not. This is the Peter Pan Echo Knight, and your Echo takes the form of your shadow. Now this can move along the floor just like a regular shadow, or it can move to a place and then rise up as a shadowy form instead. And remember, they can move anywhere, so of course up walls and across ceilings, and if you really wanted to drive the Peter Pan aesthetic home, you'd have to catch it at the end of the fight and retie it back onto your feet. And when I think of interacting with a shadow self of yours, I also think of Dark Link or Shadow Link. It's okay as it's connected to you, but perhaps at one point it ever becomes disconnected, you and your party members now have to fight it. It could also represent an evil version of yourself in a reality where you're making all the wrong decisions, where you're on the BBEG's side. But instead of a different reality, this could come from a different plane. This shadow self of yours actually coming from the Shadowfell, as the form of a Shadowborn. The Shadowfell being a reflection of the material world or the real world on top of it, meaning that when you're born up here, there's another version of you born down here. This world being a culmination of all of the bad choices of society. This could also look like the Upside Down, just a similar but alien. But there's one more alternate self idea that I want to explore before we get to the crazy stuff. This one I call the mirror. But instead of the alternate version of you, it's actually the alternate version of your enemy or the person that you're fighting. You sifting through a million different alternate realities in order to find one that they're actually fighting on your side. Or heck, if you're fighting a devil, perhaps there's some weird reality out there where they're actually good creatures. Or perhaps when you pull them from another reality, they actually have a haze over their mind and they just temporarily see you as the ally. If you're a DM and you're putting an Echo Knight to fight your players, your Echo being one of the player characters from another reality and it's fighting them. Maybe even giving your players the opportunity to convince the Echo that they're fighting for the wrong side. You attempting to clear the haze in the reflavored summoning spell. If you're a player, you can make mirrored versions of everyone that you defeat, pulling from their potential energy from a life they would have lived. And with this essence being a mirrored versions of themselves, perhaps if they had a scar on their right side, it is instead on their left. This would actually be a real slap in the face to a villain. Let's say if you take their minion, create an echo out of them, and then fight the villain with it. Now, if you feel that this video is adding value to you, consider hitting that like button. It does the world for me and other YouTube creators to get our video out there, as well as make more content like this one for you guys. I just hope that I'm one of those creators that you want to see more from. Up next, we'll look at an Echo Knight that uses their environment to create their echo, but instead of an alternate versions of of themselves, we're dealing with constructs and awakened objects. The Conjurer Echo Knight might be in a room where they animate a bookshelf or a couch or a rug to aid them in their fight, temporarily imbuing these objects with magic or even a soul. Because you never know, there might be a reality where all of the objects have souls. But as to not break the game or mislead you in any way, it would still be your stats that you would be using for these animated objects, but they're just flavor text or visual aesthetic. If you're outside, you could pull together a construct from leaves or snow or grass, and this construct copies your fighting styles because, hey, you're its creator. This could also be a statue that's torn from the wall when you animate it, or a picture that crawls out in a 2D form. Or you could also carry around materials for this. Perhaps you throw out a pair of clothes, or you have a marionette that now activates without strings. Or here's a weird idea, perhaps take inspiration from Rapunzel, and you have a long hair that comes out 30 feet and becomes a hair golem, I guess? And I think the Trolls movie also had like prehensile hair. So there you go, there's your Gnome Echo Knight for your next campaign. Perhaps your Echo is reflavored to be a spell, like Cloud of Daggers, or Summon Beast, giving your Echo Knight a real ranger or druidic feel. Your Echo being a bear or a monkey or other beast under your control, either in a physical form, right, or a spiritual one, pulling from a nature spirits or the animal from another reality. Or perhaps a world where you are this animal. And what also might be really funny is instead of a marionette, you actually carry around a taxidermied cat, and then you just reanimate it when you summon your Echo. Of course, not letting anyone know how the cat died in the first place. No, that's real deep backstory stuff. You could also be conjuring a small swarm of animals like bats or rats that are dispersed if they're hit, but you could also animate trees or bushes to come to help. And just because this idea is so cool and I didn't have anywhere else to put it, perhaps you're a tree ant and your Echo is a dryad that connects to you, the tree, as its home. They, of course, being very invested in your safety as you die, they die. But then another form of conjuration magic actually warrants its own category with the Portal Echo Knight. Before, your Echo has been an animated figure or humanoid or creature of some type. In this case, it's just a portal that's open only to you. When you summon it, you of course put the portal out 30 feet or whatever, and then you have one right next to you. You can attack normally as you will, or reach into that portal and attack somebody from the other side. It is a one-way portal, but still people can choose to attack it in order to dismiss it. You enter the portal with your whole body, and this is basically your teleport, where the orientation reverts itself, and now it's one way the other way. On the recon missions, it's just you kind of pushing your face through the portal and then moving your portal as needed. You can also reflavor your range attacks as melee attacks in creating a lot of smaller other portals and reaching into them. Of course, in later levels, you do get to summon multiple echoes or multiple portals in this case. Take Misty Step with the Magic Initiate feat if you wanted to expand on this portal teleportation idea. You could have gotten your abilities from an accident involving a portal, or it could just be an item that you have on your person that creates these. But now moving from the school of conjuration to another spell school, we find some new flavor with the Illusion Echo Knight. You have hyper-focused a speciality in illusion, making your Echo a tangible one. This illusion could still look like you or an enemy or one of your allies, but unless the DM is super kind, it could still obviously be an illusion to those that look onto it. You sacrificing realism for tangibility to make it mechanically sound. It could also take on the form of a big arcane hand or visual aspects like the Phantasmal Force or major image spells. In fact, take all of the things that we've talked about so far and just make them illusions. This might also be the category for a spiritual weapon, summoning a spectral version of the sword that you wield. But speaking of spells, you could also flavor these things as living spells, like Living Burning Hands, Living Lightning Bolt, or Living Cloud Kill. These spells could gain sentience with your specialized form of magic. In a futuristic setting, this could look like a hologram that you throw up a floating projector that creates this echo, which then leads us to other contraptions that you can use for the Echo Knight with the turret, bringing skills of artifice to make an echo made out of metal and gears. This construct could look like a backpack that, when summoned, comes out and unfolds into a walking tripod with a sword extension. This thing could stand its ground and wait for a command for you, or you have a little remote on your person that you press a button and it attacks whatever's in front of it. And I should mention again that this thing can fly, so you can put a little propeller on it if you want, but unfortunately, before you get any ideas, you can't fly with it. Unfortunately, the rules don't allow that unless your DM really is, again, kind. I also picture those like floating Jedi training balls, but you would just have to kind of change it to be short ranged. But what I also think would be really cool is if you're a cyborg creature and your echo is literally part of yourself. Your entire arm can disconnect with one of your dual swords, it having a little propeller around that fights alongside you. You either attack with your left arm that's still flesh and connected with your body, or your right one that's robotic. You could completely be a construct where you split yourself in order to make your echo. Not splitting yourself in half this way, but in half this way from side to side. Your front half and your back half now being independent. I'm also thinking that if you had armor, you could also animate these things as an animated armor. But with all of these ideas, really try to cash in on the creative freedom that you all have, and talk with your DM to see what all is possible. If you have other riff flavors in mind for the Echo Knight or have played your own Echo Knight in the past, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. And if you want to see other subclasses that I haven't covered yet, please let me know in the comments below as well. So you want to play the Astral Self Monk. You want to tap into your ki to conjure a visage of your true self. But then you think, how can I be a little bit more creative with it? What if your higher self came from lycanthropy or a result of mechanical bioengineering? How can we reflavor this subclass to awaken new ideas for your next monk character? Hello Acolytes! Welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Astral Self Monks give you a variety of special spectral body parts as you level up, all summoned with your key points. You start with extra arms that let you use wisdom for all of your strength-based rolls and attacks, being able to punch with those arms instead of your own, as well as an extra 5-foot reach. Then you get to conjure a visage of a head that gives you super far dark vision, advantage on insight and intimidation, and telepathy or voice amplification. Then you conjure a spectral body that allows you to deflect elemental damage and hit harder. Lastly, you can conjure the full effect of your higher self to gain all other benefits, as well as a bonus to your armor class with an extra attack. But now that we know the mechanics behind it, let's give it a fresh coat of paint. Here are 10 concepts to make your next character more you and more unique. Let's start with the head. There are many body parts to put inspiration in this case. What powerful heads would a monk be able to conjure? My first thought was the Hydra. Imagine a monk that can channel those heads into arms that attack. Each time the enemy hurts you and cuts one off, another 2 takes its place, maybe, if your DM's very nice. It's for flavor, of course. You'd still be able to attack the same amount of times as always. Perhaps you're a Dragonborn that worships Tiamat, and your spectral arms are the heads of the Dragon Queen herself. In many depictions, the Chimera also has multiple heads. Perhaps your extra arms you conjure is a spectral form of the scorpion tail that it has. Or maybe you have giant blood and channel the Etin, a 2-headed giant, and your spectral arms are just twice your size with giant-sized arms. Take inspiration also from Medusa or Cerberus or other multi-headed creatures from folklore. Moving on to the arms, we look at creatures with extra arms to take inspiration from. And I don't know why I did this. And I might add that with these creatures, you could be these creatures and you channel ki to start your 4-armed fighting style. Or you can summon just a spectral version of it as you have connection with these creatures. So there are a lot. So rapid fire, we have the Girlon, the Thrycreen, the 4-armed Sahuagin, the Merilith, Dolgrim, Dire Troll, this one you can regrow your limbs at will, Starspawn Mangler, Glabrezu, or the Dragloth. Even make your extra limbs as a plasmoid, or take from other media like a Shokin from Mortal Kombat, or the Geganese, a giant race from Greek mythology. Or perhaps you're just a regular human or a similar race that can grow their arms physically, pulling from Spider-Man when he got 6 arms. Perhaps you were blessed this way from the Spider Queen Lolth herself. Your head could get pincers and your body get an exoskeleton. If you're worried about your DM not allowing you to play any of these monstrous races, check out my playlist of videos where I go over reflavoring official races into the ones that you want. But speaking of exoskeletons, there is also a lot that you can do with that. With the body, you take normally discarded parts of your body and use them in unique fighting capabilities. You could take the Yuntai snake person or a lizard folk that uses their shedded skin peeled off their back to fight. This is such a strange idea, but I love it. Many bugs shed their exoskeleton in a similar way, or a crab person could keep around their shedded claws. And I don't know if anyone's talked about this, but like, do dragons shed their skin? They're lizard-like, right? It makes sense. But you could also have animated armor that sheds partly off your back, your gauntlets or arm pads that come off of you as separate entities, kind of acting like Doctor Strange's cape. But if you're just thinking visually for your body, put on a spectral carapace or bestial hair. Which brings us to an idea that comes from genetic experimentation and splicing. With the hybrid, your extra arms are from surgical implantation, taking a lot from Simic Hybrid from the Ravnica setting, attaching lobsters or octopus tentacles to your back and channel these extra limbs with your key. You could have spider legs attached, or maybe magical creatures like the Chol or the Choker. The Unitide did these hybridizations well too, so go talk to them. But what if your animal parts come from more of a spectral realm? You're channeling your higher self from an alternate reality where you are the animal in question. Or it is a spirit animal protector that you got when you came of age. Or go full Frankenstein where your arms are a variety of different racial arms that you just attached to yourself. But what if instead of splicing flesh to your skin, you are splicing mechanical upgrades? With the cyborg, give yourself iron spider arms, or Edith glasses from Iron Man, or in unfoldable armor. Give yourself nanotechnology to create these things, or artificer engineering with pulleys and levers. But use too much and it is easily broken or needs a recharge of battery. Your arms and visage could also be holograms. Perhaps you're a double amputee and you have holographic arms to begin with. And when you flick a switch, your arms split into two, taking from like General Grievous. Need I say more? Along those same lines, your visage could also come strictly from illusion magic. With the illusion, your spectral self could only be seen by the person that you are attacking. Perhaps when they think that you are coming to punch them with your spectral self or your illusion self, your actual self comes in with a right hook, catching them off guard. So in this case, your illusion self is actually not doing the attacking at all. They could think that you are hitting them with this higher self, but in reality, it's just you. Your higher body could be more like a mage armor of sorts to keep in the theme of magic as well. Also, just be creative on what this illusion is. Perhaps you can change it every time that you summon it. Could be dark tentacles one moment, and then the next it would be giant gorilla fists. But instead of arcane magic, or magic from within, as key often is, what about divine magic? With the vessel, it isn't your higher self that you tap into, it's a higher being. You are a vessel for a god or celestial that can emerge from your body and bolster your power. I would even take from real world religions with gods that have multiple arms, like Durga from Hindu mythos, or Moresi, if I got that right, from Buddhism, or the 6 wings of a seraphim from Christianity. Many different cultures have depictions of gods or angelic creatures with multiple arms. So talk with your DM and see how you can bring them into your game. Or if you'd rather take an atheistic approach, you could be sharing the vessel with a ghost, a demon, or an ancient ancestor. Have them merge with your person as a temporary ally. OD&D supplement Demigods and Heroes actually gives some insight in many different gods and could give you inspiration for your games. I'll include a link below for you guys, not sponsored. But who says that your spectral arms have to be arms? As long as it stays close to the person and attacks for you, the mechanics work the same, and it could be anything. With the orbital, make a spectral arm away from your body just the same as a spectral sword or mace. Perhaps it's an Ioun Stone, a small magical crystal that orbits around you. Or it's a will-o-wisp, or simply a magical ball of force. Maybe even make it like a small helper, like a bird or a fairy. Every time you summon it, it tells you to listen, but ends up being helpful, so you ignore how annoying that is. Make your orbital out of elemental magic like fire, water, stone, or cloud. Or make your arms just made out of these elements. But continuing to ignore the extra arms flavor, we look at the incredible. Perhaps your extra 5-foot reach and attacks come from elasticity and stretchy arms. Your other features just come as magical boons. Dark vision and deflection of energy could come from a pact you made with a patron, or a magical gift that you received from a powerful wizard. Your empowered arms and intimidation could come from a powerful oath that you made to yourself. Just a reminder again that subclasses are just a list of features of how you interact with the magical world. How those things visually manifest is completely up to you. Spectral arms are just an optional flavor that they give you. So next we continue with another out there idea, the Lycan. In this case, your higher self is something more bestial. You could be a werewolf, a werecrow, or anything else that makes sense. As you make your transformations that increases in power, you get bonuses to strength, dark vision, intimidation, amplified voice, and tougher skin. All that you can fit with animalistic transformations. Instead of extra arms, you're just quicker with the 2 that you have. Or you're a were spider and you don't have to worry about it. This could also fit a vampiric transformation, or even a fey transformation. Maybe I'll leave this one up to you. What other transformations would you implement? But I hope that with all of these, I helped transform your thinking about this subclass. Let me know what ideas you've had and what other subclasses that you want to see in the comments below.
Vengeance.
Vengeance.
Vengeance!
Vengeance. Don't forget vengeance.
The Oath of Vengeance is a solemn commitment to punish those who have committed a grievous sin. One who is enacting revenge themselves or taking it upon themselves to avenge another who was wronged.
What the hell? The Paladin killed me!
Their own purity is not as important as delivering justice.
The fanatics, religious nutjobs, Inquisition, witch hunts, that was them.
However, there is more to this subclass than meets the eye. What if your oath was instead to bring dreams into reality, or your own unfinished business?
Let's smite the varlet! Ha!
Hello Acolytes, this is the Cleric Corner, and here is another episode of the Better Classes series, to reskin and reflavor your familiar subclasses to make them entirely new for evocative new character ideas. And of course, if you stay to the end, expect something for free to expand on one of these 10 character concepts. But first, what does an Oath of Vengeance Paladin actually do? When you start out at this subclass at 3rd level, you can use Channel Divinities to frighten a creature and immobilize them with fear, stopping them in their tracks.
He will smite you all! God will smite you all!
You can also choose one creature and go absolutely feral on them, channeling all of your childhood trauma and getting advantage on attack rolls against them. Your Paladin spell list is also very awesome with Bane, Hunter's Mark, Hold Person, Misty Step, Haste, Protection from Energy, Banishment, Dimension Door, Hold Monster, and Scrying. Probably one of the best assortment of extra Paladin spells. But great thing about spellcasters is that you can always prepare other spells to better fit your specific character thing. At 7th level, you can hit an enemy and then move away safely without provoking opportunity attacks. Then at 15th level, you get further therapy with extra reaction attacks against the guy you're going feral on. Then finally, at 20th level, you can undergo a transformation that gives you a flight speed, an aura that frightens creatures within it, and advantage on attacks against anyone that is frightened. But when we take away the flavor text and just focus in on the mechanics, what other unique character ideas can we come up with? The Nightmare is a paladin that channels magic from the plane of dreams, their smites being a psychic attack on your subconscious.
Dream, 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 dream.
When they cause fear in an individual, it is showing an illusion of their worst fears, or creating a nightmare within an altered reality of their mind. You can then cause someone to be in a state of drowsiness or hypnosis to give you advantage on attacks.
Dream, 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 dream.
You can even be a Kalash Star race from Eberron, a juxtaposition of human and dream spirits. You could even be the dream or nightmare of someone else, looking to make a life or purpose for themselves on the material plane, wanting to become real, or perhaps born from the dream of the BBEG. You are literally his worst nightmare and the only thing he imagines can defeat him. The hubris of his own imagination becomes his downfall. Or perhaps you are the manifested dream of a party member, an imaginary friend, or psychic projection. But speaking of being psychic, the telekinetic proves mind over matter while empowering their swings of their sword with psychic force. They push, pull, hold, and empower with telekinesis, manipulating things with their mind.
So you can move things with his mind!
With this power, you can hold enemies still while wailing on them with a sword. You don't need accuracy, you just need a target that's not moving.
Fish in a barrel, birdie. Fish in a barrel.
You can eventually lift yourself in the air with your psychic power, and to really finish off the concept, it wouldn't hurt to get a magic initiate feat with Mage Hand to bring home the telekinetic feel. For this concept really is benefited with the spell list already given to you. Perhaps you are a Githyanki or other psionic race that was literally born with this ability, or it came from some aberrational interference. But sometimes you don't need to be all fancy and magical to get a good concept. Sometimes simplicity can be the most solid of concepts. The hunter is gifted in the art of overpowering a single prey. They target a single creature and vow to finish the hunt, no matter the cost.
Get him! Get him! Get him!
And honestly, personally, the Oath of the Hunt is just a really cool name. But with spells like Haste, Bane, and Hunter's Mark, you already have much of a Ranger-esque feel to it. But add the challenge of only hunting with melee weapons, and you get a character who hunts for the sheer thrill of it. One that may become one with the wilds or even part beast themselves, as they channel their carnal self and go savage on their prey.
You're an animal!
But it just as well could be someone more dignified, one that tires of other big game and boring old hunts. Now they have a taste for humans. Like the movies The Hunt or The Hunted, they have acquired twisted pleasure in hunting down species of their own kind.
Cigarettes in Arkansas only cost $6. You f***ed up, bitch!
If that doesn't paralyze you with fear, I don't know what will. On another side of this coin, I could see a bounty hunter character paid to track down individuals and bring them back dead or alive. But if we have a concept for the hunter, what about a concept for the things that they hunt? The monster is when our paladin goes past being a little bestial and goes fully into monstrosity, taking on qualities of different creatures through exposure, monster parts collecting, or blood lineage.
Let's hope it's a phase.
Remember, our paladin can frighten someone into not moving, as well as frighten many individuals in an aura. And turns out there are a few monstrosities with these kinds of abilities. I can imagine a Thrycreen race, insectoid, being much like the Meanlock, fake creatures that are literally spawned by fear and can teleport around. Good thing you have Misty Step available in your spell list. You could also be a descendant of a harpy, able to sing a screeching ballad to stun your enemies while you pick them apart. I could even see you having an aberrational transformation like a beholder, casting spells through your fear rays through eye stalks you keep under thick layers of clothing. But these effects can also be flavored to not be fear, but petrification. Imagine a Yuan-Ti race like a Medusa, or a Minotaur race like a Gorgon, each slowly petrifying a creature to hold them still and slice them into ribbons. But you tell me, what scary monstrosity would you channel? Comment below while we move to another creature type, the undead. The Banshee is someone stuck in the in-between, a paladin with an oath of unfinished business, also a really cool name. But their smites are the literal screams of a banshee reverberating through your blade. You could be the banshee yourself, stuck in the material plane until you finish what you started in your previous life, a ghost possessing your own undead body or the body of another. You can manifest the horrifying visage of a banshee to frighten targets, and eventually float like a ghost. Or a banshee or spirit has possessed your sword, and you must finish their unfinished business for them, whether it be mutually beneficial or you must complete the task to be rid of them for good. I actually had a player in a campaign have their sword possessed with their dead wife. Imagine your sword nagging you to make the bed or fold your armor right. But what if you played in the afterlife itself, the Shadowfell, the ethereal plane, or some dark afterlife or in-between place? Either fighting your way back for your unfinished business, or making a new life pursuing undead lords of the grave. If that tickles the back of your skull, then may I introduce Erevan's Guide to Death and Beyond, a massive 350 plus page tome by Arcvillain Games for a full setting that comes after your party TPKs, either continuing from a campaign that you are currently playing, or starting out with the character's death itself with a level 1 through 10 adventure. Become new undead races with unique resurrection mechanics, graft undead gifts into your flesh, ride ships fueled with the souls of the dead, and use new dark subclasses, craftable items, and haunting spells to fight a plethora of unholy monsters and undying megabosses, complete with their own profane layers. And if we are talking about paladins today, you might want to check out the Oath of the Jailer, putting the undead in their rightful place.
It's time for this paladin to cast a 21st level spell, Zombie Whoop Ass.
Now go back Erevan's Guide to Death and Beyond on Kickstarter today, before your party TPKs. Link in the description below. And remember, death is not the end. But getting back to our reflavoring, I think the next concept will equally chill you to the bone. The rhyme comes straight from the eternal winters of the north, their blades so cold that it feels like a smite. As you all know, I'm a huge proponent of changing damage types for flavor, and a smite of cold is super flavorful to me.
Winter is coming.
But instead of causing fear in your enemies, you are immobilizing them with encasing their feet in ice, or causing an aura of snow and flurries that keep enemies from drawing nearer, or even using the flurry to fly yourself. The cold may just slow down your enemy enough to give yourself the advantage, mixing the icy blue with the blood red. You have either been born of the cold or imbued with the magic of it. But if not ice, then what other things can cause a creature to become immobile? The stinging nettle has power over plants instead of ice. They are imbued with druidic power to grow flowers that shoot poisonous barbs, or vines with microscopic slivers that temporarily stun or slow an enemy creature. They could even be poisonous spores from mushrooms or pollen from the trees. A creature may go on a psychedelic trip while trying to fight their way to you. Your smites may even be imbued with the power of the Feywild if you want to go that route, causing the fear of the unseelie court to emanate from you, and teleporting like a Fey would. Be a Dryad, Eladrin, or other elf to bring the Fey influence home. But talking about drawing power from another plane, what about the plane of hell? The Pit Fiend is from a specific creature of the same name, a devil with a literal fear aura. Seems pretty on par for us with an Oath of Vengeance Paladin. Imagine being a tiefling with Pit Fiend-like features. Some other fiends with a fear aura include a Rak Tolkesh, who can actually change shape into a humanoid, wink wink, and Yinogu, a hyena-like demon, perfect for a Null-like character. But just seeing this as a feature of devilish influence opens it up to take your power from an assortment of different devils. Imagine your smites being powered by the flames of hell, and just looking like a fiend yourself causes others to hesitate about the consequences of swinging a sword at you. Tieflings and xenophobia have gone hand in hand in editions past, of course.
It's racist.
Be a creature with a devil's deal gone south, or pick up a sword with a devil contained inside. But there is one more monster that uses fear as a trait, and perhaps the most famously. The dragon is exactly what you're thinking about. A dragonborn or other dragon-touched individual manifesting the frightful presence of their heritage, possibly even manifesting your own draconic wings at later levels. And bonus points for choosing a specific dragon heritage and changing your smites into the damage type of that dragon. Acid damage for black, poison for green, lightning for blue, cold for white, and so on. In that case, maybe even tie the rhyme concept with your white dragon concept for an extra icy flavor. And as a dragon, maybe your extra reaction attacks you get are from the draconic tail you swipe at an opportune moment. Dragons are natural hunters and something that all creatures take seriously. However, our next concept is something that you might take a little less seriously. The Catoblepus has such a special place in my heart just for its absurdity and humor. I've actually mentioned it in one of my other race reflavoring videos before, but imagine a cow farts so much and reeks so bad you become poisoned while within a certain range of it, and just might die of necrotic damage. So in essence, you have a paladin that just stinks really, really bad. And that smell provides an odd protection as others are too fearful to get closer, just in case it could get worse. This aura could come from your literal lack of personal hygiene, or you could be touched by the plane of ooze, or connected to a magical bog, or it could be coming from the stench of death with a more undead flavor. Just follow your nose and I'm sure you can find something creative. So whether it be expanding on these ideas or proposing some of your own, let me know your fun ideas in the comments below. So, you're looking to shake things up with a new Swarmkeeper Ranger character, and you're in need of a couple ideas. For those of you who are familiar with this channel, we've already taken all of the official classes in D&D and flavored them into different archetypes and ideas for your table. So what happens if we dive deep into a singular subclass? How many different ideas can we come up with to make your Swarmkeeper unique, and maybe even change what a Swarmkeeper really means? Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. As we look at the Swarmkeeper Ranger, we know that character creation is one of the funnest parts of D&D. What's even more fun is when we create concepts or find new ideas that we didn't think of and may have not even existed in D&D before. So gather your swarm and be ready for inspiration, because we're going over 10 character concepts. Starting with the Zookeeper, we already have a plethora of different options when it comes to animals inside of our swarm. Bugs, arachnids, birds, crabs, bats, lizards, snakes, fish, you name it. Take away the Lord of the Rings Ranger type and replace it with your kind, neighborly cat lady. But remember, we also have some interesting and different beasts in D&D that can also populate our swarms. We have sturges, flying snakes, tressims, and other things that you can just open up the monster manual and figure out how these creatures came out of your backstory. If we are a type of dragon hunter, or we kind of just vibe with dragons, we can look at the egg hunter hatchling or the horde scarab, possibly even allowing you to mess with dragon hordes in the future. We can come from a wizardly background and have a swarm full of homunculi, or germlanes, a tiny underdark creature that loves rats. And on that note too, who says that your swarm has to make up of just one type of creature? Why don't you have germlanes and rats kind of incorporate your swarm, or really just have a literal zoo around you? You can have frogs, salamanders, axolotls, and fireflies incorporate your swarm if, say, your favorite terrain was the swamp, or lizards, burrowing owls, snakes, and kangaroo rats if you came from the desert. But after animals, we come to the next closest thing, the greenhouse. We get flora and fauna on our side as we learn to manipulate plant matter. The subclass already mentions twig blights, but why not have a swarm of rose petals swarm around you, or dandelion seeds, or grass blades, doing like a razor leaf attack for those Pokemon fans out there. Perhaps you're a potato or a tomato farmer and you attack with bludgeoning vegetables. Perhaps it's a swirl of seaweed, cactus, pine cones, or pollen. Of course, taking the whole biome idea too and asking yourself what kind of plants come from the biome or your favorite terrain. Even from the Underdark, your plants could look more like mushrooms or a floating bioluminescence, creating a type of mood lighting as you're disemboweling your enemies. Or your swarm is just a cloud of these spores that these poisonous mushrooms give off. The plants you summoned could also be awakened like animals, say the campestry, the singing mushroom, or the vegapygmy. I can also picture a bunch of small mushrooms that are walking on their vines in a very human way, but you could also just summon your swarm from whatever is around you, say like the roots beneath your feet, whipping your enemies and moving you around. There's a lot of aesthetics on this one. But plants are just one element. What about earth, fire, wind, or water? The Elementalist creates a swarm aura of these elemental planar magics. And another possible way of bringing bending into your games, a water swarm is a watery sphere, or a foggy mist, or a bunch of ice crystals. Earth could be sand, rocks, or sharpened gemstones. Air could be a stinking cloud, or a cloud kill, or a very concentrated electric storm. Your fire swarm could be a wreath of flames around you, or globules of magma, kind of like a lava lamp. Or just do an assortment of all of them and have your very own avatar state. To go a little further, what if your magic didn't come from the elemental planes, but let's say the upper and lower planes? They're positive and negative. Looking to the stars, your swarm could be a mini galaxy or solar system that orbits you, or spots of light in constellations that creates your very own star dome. Or taking from the lower planes, your swarm could literally just be your shadow, animated and fighting alongside you, kind of like Peter Pan. And even so, better try to keep it on a leash or it might escape. But now let's take a spiritual approach with the Spiritual Guardian, and yes, it's exactly what it sounds. Just as the Spirit Guardian spell that the clerics have, where it's a summoning of ancestral spirits or otherwise to help fight alongside you, the Swarmkeeper Ranger works basically the same way. Or you can take another spell from the clerical spell list as inspiration, the Spiritual Weapon, and have a bunch of spiritual weapons around you as your swarm, complements of maybe whatever god you serve. Or just a pure divine energy or radioactivity that emanates out of you as you take on more of a divine state. This could also take more of a druidic approach, where the spirits that kind of embody your swarm are more nature spirits, or spirits of the critters that have long passed. An undead flavor might change these ancestral spirits into ghosts or wraiths, or a scientific approach where they're holograms. But the next flavor is a menagerie of non-living material that you can use as your swarm with the telekinetic. And this one, we take spells like animated objects to the next level, or you have knives, swords, or ninja stars that encompass your swarm. Now this might be specialization in martial for your character, but if you wanted to go more wizardly, your swarm could just be books, paper, and ink. Perhaps the paper is even folded into different origami cranes that attacks your enemy and gives them paper cuts. Pots and pans if you're a cook, or possibly glass if you're a glass blower. But these could also be animated dolls or stuffed animals if you wanted to take the creepy child approach. But of course your swarm again doesn't have to be specific, as you can just telekinetically lift up whatever's in your vicinity. But it also doesn't have to be telekinetic really either. You could have an Artificer flavored Swarmkeeper and create little devices that you can activate, and a bunch of little needles on propellers kind of go up in the air and swarm around. And needles on propellers, I realize I'm giving someone nightmares tonight. But you know what I mean, like tiny metallic robotic insects that you can activate. You can also reflavor your Swarmkeeper as, say, Magneto and pick up magnetic items or metal. Maybe even have a tornado of barbed wire? But speaking of the Marvel universe, you could also do something with the cape of Doctor Strange. You have animated clothes that help fight your battles with you and fly you up in the air and pull you out of danger. Now, I should mention that a lot of these ideas include possibly different damage types that's not included in the subclass, where originally it's just piercing damage. I personally am very open to changing damage types to create a new story for your character, but work with your DM to make sure that it's okay. But DMs also know that you're in complete control of what you throw your players, and can very much make it a challenge. The same way as you're able to say no to a player if a certain concept really doesn't fit your setting. It is a collaborative game after all. But hey, I just want to cut in here halfway and just say thank you for watching this video. I'm going through a number of different video concepts and different ideas and really weighing what's popular and what you guys really like. What to continue on full force, or maybe possibly wait a time until it's a little bit more relevant. Or tell me in the comments below your different flavor ideas for the Swarmkeeper, or tell me about one you've already played. If this video does well, I'll be sure to look into other subclasses that we can dive deep into. And of course, having polls in my Patreon to figure out which ones to do next. But even if no one likes this video, I appreciate that you do. This next concept is one that I'm really excited for because it brings in an element of my childhood. The Blubber. This being an example of a Swarmkeeper that works with Oblexes and ooze spawns. Rangers are known to traverse all over the material plane and even the multiverse, and so favored foe or not, they love working with these giant amoebas. These could be either little ooze bubbles that kind of float around you, or literally blubbers that go around and fight by your side. Or it's a puddle of ooze that literally comes out of your form as you're part ooze yourself. Be it a clear kind of ooze like a gelatinous cube, or black from black pudding, or yellow from ochre jelly, or even the very rare white ooze from the Arctic. If your ranger comes with a specific favored terrain, ask yourself which kind of ooze comes from this area. You can also kind of mix the ideas with this as well as the animated objects from the telekinetic, and have a bunch of mimics that swarm around you, changing forms in the air and becoming different objects on demand. Take up the cantrip Minor Illusion and reflavor that as your mimic becoming whatever you're trying to portray. But next we look at other planes of existence that we can pull inspiration for our ranger. So starting out, let's look at the Fae, and in the subclass it does mention pixies to be in your swarm, so that includes intelligent creatures as well. So summon a horde of mining loving Briganocks that have their soul outside of their bodies. Sprites, brownies, and fairies all fall under this Fae umbrella. You could also have a bunch of snack-loving Kilmiyus? Something like that, but they love hospitality and generosity. Or a Quickling, which are known to be incredibly fast, and hey, the enemy might not even see it coming. Or you can have a swarm of fairy dragons. Not that fairy dragon. That fairy dragon. But hey, this might be the only way to have a swarm of dragons to aid you, but that's up to you in the DM. Moving from the Feywild to the Abyss, let's look at the Fiend. Your ranger took deals with demons or devils and have their magic from that plane. Perhaps even a warlocky feel when you summon in some imps or quasits as a swarm. Or take a creepy approach with the Vargul or Vargui. Those double L's kill me. Or become a meme and have a bunch of abyssal chickens. You can take one from the Elementalist, and instead of the wreath of flames that you get from the fire plane, this time it comes from hell. But now going to the Shadowfell, we find the undead. And we've already mentioned race and ghost with the spiritual guardian, but there's a lot more that we can do with this. Take all of the animals in the zookeeper that we talked about and just give them exposed ribs and missing eyeballs, and you get the picture. And instead of summoning them from a different plane, you could literally just pull them from the earth beneath you and kind of have a Russian roulette on what comes out. Skeletons of squirrels and cats that may fight by your side. Or you can have just a bunch of sharp bones that you've whittled down from previous kills. Or go full minimalist and have just an aura of necrotic energy around you, or have your shadow that we talked about be a little bit more evil. Some other fun swarms might be a bunch of crawling hands, which to me is absolutely terrifying, or a bunch of flame skulls that fly around you with their teeth chattering threateningly, or summon just a bunch of will-o-wisps, which are very fitting because they're known to bring adventurers to their doom. Next, leading us to the Far Realm, and this one might be solely for the DM because it can get pretty intense pretty quick. But hey, at your table, it can look like anything. But with the Far Realm, you can have a Swarmkeeper have a swarm of Mind Flayer tadpoles that are desperate to force people through Ceramorphosis. So yeah, this would be a complicated PC, but a horrifying BBEG. Same with Slod tadpoles, honestly. Just live out your alien dreams. But luckily there are a few comparatively less scary things that you can take and be a part of your swarm, say Intellect Devourers and Squidlings. Combine this with a bunch of zombie summoning spells and you can have your swarm of Intellect Devourers actually replace the brains of those that have fallen. Or you can use the Gazer, which is the cutest little beholderkin. Or take from the recent Netherdeep book and take from their aberrations with the Sorrowfish or Serpent Maw. And then of course everyone's favorite aberration, the Flump. But whatever you choose, just be excited for a character that you can really make your own. Use one of these or create something new. I just hope that I got the inspiration flowing. Phantom Rogues are a subclass that adds the spook to your blade. A rogue that hangs out in the graveyard and makes friends with the voices that rise from the dirt. And from those voices, they tend to learn a few things.
Wait till I ask a question. Are you evil? Once for yes, two for no.
Crypt Keepers, Death Worshippers, Friends of Necromancers, however they got here, they recover knowledge that might otherwise be lost to the grave. But we are not here to make a character like that. No, we are here to reskin and reflavor, to create a unique character or NPC to turn the ghosts that haunt you into angels that praise you, or even works of science.
Forgot about my new toys. Let's go.
Hello Acolytes, this is the Cleric Corner, and here we extend the Better Class series, which, after a year, is a long time coming. So for the uninitiated, I will be going over the features of the subclass, what it can do mechanically, and then putting a new skin on top of it to make it truly unique. Then, if you stay till the end, I promise there will be something free for you to enjoy to expand upon one of these 10 character concepts. So let's wet those blades, shall we? When you get the subclass at 3rd level, you get to change a skill or tool proficiency over a short or long rest. Additionally, when you deal sneak attack damage, you can deal half of the damage to someone 30 feet away a few times. At 9th level, you can create a token when a character dies within 30 feet of you, and with this token, you have advantage on death saves and constitution saving throws. You can ask the token a question, which you'll get an answer, and you can deal your sneak attack damage a few extra times. At 13th level, you can choose into a form that allows you to fly, albeit very slowly. Attack rolls have disadvantage against you, and you can move through other creature spaces. At 14th level, your extra sneak attack damage increases, and you gain an extra token at the beginning of every day. Now, did you notice I didn't say what the features were called? That was on purpose, because when we reflavor, they don't matter. The first feature could be called Wails of the Grave, or it could be called Angelic Penance. Both mechanically do the exact same thing, but gives two entirely different vibes, which leads us to our first character concept. The Bishop is a religious figure by all accounts, and still deals with the dead, but offers eulogies and veneration for the dead. Their purpose is to bring solace and peace to families of the recently departed, and has thus gained a closeness with the deceased. even hearing the last confessions as they pass on, whether it be to heaven or to hell.
We must alert the church elders.
Or we don't have to focus on the dead at all, but we know that the veil between here and heaven, or whatever it is there, becomes thin when someone dies, allowing the bishop to talk to angels for information. You pull righteous penance with your gaze like Ghost Rider as you enact righteous justice with your blade. And maybe angels themselves might lend you their wings. But then there are also some who deal with the dead in less honest terms. The tarot is also one that works with the dead, but in a more esoteric and seance-y kind of way. You know the type, those that take speaking with the dead to an occupation with crystal balls and tarot cards.
Ooh, tarot cards, freaky!
The College of Spirits bard type of character. And with all the haunted objects that you appraised, you might be a little haunted yourself. Or possibly, just maybe, you have no magical gift whatsoever and your abilities are just a facade, bringing your pulleys of levitation and fancy light tricks to the field with you. But there are also those who deal in esoteric magic for real. The Witch is exactly what it sounds like, a hag that deals in black magic and is comfortable in things that make normal men squeamish. Now you might realize that phantom rogues don't have magic, so we are focusing on one aspect of this witch, where you specialize in something called haruspices or haruspices, the practice of divination through the entrails and guts of creatures.
If these divinations are correct, the fallen star lies 100 miles away.
So when something dies, a quick look at their innards will give up information that could prove useful. The tokens that you collect are the internal body parts to look at later if you're in a rush.
I've his kidney. I've his liver. And I've his heart.
But just as there are witches, there are also wizards. A couple weeks ago, I came out with a video about spellbooks and alternate ways to get spells. Instead of finding them from spell scrolls, you can pull the essence of creatures to learn new spells from their abilities. You can check out that video up here. But again, you're a rogue and you can't cast spells. But you can use their essence in a different way to gain knowledge that is intertwined with it. You can also use the essence to protect you in some cases, or damage other creatures with it. It is a magical essence after all, and you can manipulate it in very interesting ways. There are multiple facets to a living being. You're just taking their magical essence instead of their soul. And that may give you the ability to go ethereal, or even fly. And speaking of flying, there may be only a few hours left for you to choose into something great for your TTRPG games. The Wandering Tavern, a floating city setting for both your 5e and similar games, is in its last days of fulfillment. If you like Skypunk or Studio Ghibli, you will love the combination of the two. Huge battle maps, story hooks, NPCs, magic items, airships, and much, much more. Everything is done for you to play a little of your own castle in the sky kind of stories. Sponsored by the father and son team, Homie and the Dude, they have really pulled out all the stops when it comes to a full flying city tavern for you to enjoy, explore, and fight spirits of the dead. You can find a link in the description for the Kickstarter, and you will be benefiting both the wonderful creators there and the Cleric Corner channel as well. And remember, the last day is May 9th, so hurry and back it before it's too late. And now, let's get back to the magic of rogues. The Archivist takes inspiration from the Wizard as well, being proficient with recording knowledge and keeping detailed record of important things. In most cases, you can find writings or journals on the carcasses of those that are killed, so you can learn about them that way.
Well, after he died, I found his journal.
When it comes to flying and moving through creatures, you're just really good at staying out of the way, and maybe you can cast fly from one of the books you found. And your dagger, when you pierce one creature, you can create a tiny little portal on your blade to make it come out of the chest of another creature nearby. Two birds with one stone, as they say. But when it comes to knowledge and obtaining it, there are some that even go to more horrifying lengths. The Eldritch is a creature of madness. They see things that others do not, at much expense to their sanity. They have been exposed to something their mind can't comprehend, causing their consciousness to rupture and be vulnerable to the knowledge and minds of those around them, especially vulnerable upon the shock of death. They are gifted with partial psionic abilities to pick up on these last frequencies upon death, making yourself fly with telekinesis and damage minds that witness your maddening state.
Driven mad by your own flesh.
Sure, you can learn things, but at what cost? Besides, I think there are ways that you can bypass the process with technology. The Fringe is inspired by a TV show of the same name. It's an inventor interested in fringe sciences, or pseudosciences, of astral projection, telepathic communication, psychokinesis, nanotechnology, and so on. In fact, one of the early episodes in the TV series featured a machine that could take a picture of the last thing a dead person saw, an image frozen in the optic nerve of the eye, or some other contraption to pull the memories from the brain with a little Artificer flavor. You're able to see the last few memories of the deceased through the device you made. Astral projection is something you master at later levels or fly from some other device that you make, but just as we took inspiration from the Artificer, what about another melee class? The monk is just really good at matching magical abilities with mere feats of strength or dexterity. So with this rogue of yours, there is nothing magical about their ability to learn new things and attack 2 people at once. Instead, your intense meditation can reveal hidden things, and your lightning fast dexterity allows you to attack with one blade while sending another flying to a second target.
Lightning fast, very skilled.
Your double jumps on air or air walks are powered by your own ki. I think similarly you could flavor a fighter character, but taking inspiration from another class might be a little bit more difficult. The Seed takes inspiration from the Druid, and a little behind the scenes of these videos, I often try to put the mechanics in the context of other classes and see how to make them work. I ask, what would this look like in a multi-classing situation?
It's not gonna fit you.
Sure it will.
And Druid proved a tad difficult, but here it is. This rogue looks best as a ranged combatant, throwing quick growing seeds to damage 2 characters at once, and storing the knowledge of the deceased in seeds, maybe even allowing one to grow into the carcass to pull out the essences within, draining more than just water. Your daily revelations or changes in skills could be attuning to the earth itself. And now there is one more class that I want to highlight as well. The Bloody gets their skill in Bloodcraft, like the Blood Hunter, taking the blood from one creature, hardening it, and stabbing the next. When something dies, the tokens you collect are in the form of vials of blood that you take from them, able to pull information through beginner's hemomancy, and your bloodbending gives you feats of power when you need it. Blood magic has many uses after all, and I'm sure that there are many other concepts that the unique abilities of the Phantom Rogue provide. So tell me about your unique rogue characters or how you would flavor it differently in the comments below. So you need a healer, but your religious trauma won't allow you to play a cleric. The Divine Soul Sorcerer caught your eye, but you want to make it more unique, more you. So let's subvert what it means to be a divine soul. Replace your connection with the divine for something like Troll Blood or Dog Heaven, and then make your character favored by more than just the gods. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. In Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, Divine Soul Sorcerers are either blessed by a god or birthed by one. As this sorcerer, you have the amazing ability to tap into the cleric spell list, expanding your horizons and your options, as well as a favored by the gods dice that you can add to your ability saving throws or your attack rolls. You can also re-roll healing dice to make your healing magic more effective, and then in later levels, be able to sprout wings and fly. And then lastly, you get the ability to heal yourself up to half of your hit point maximum when you get too low. But just like as we do on this channel, we're going to take the flavor text of this subclass, throw it out the window, and give the gods a day off. What other concepts can we reflavor the Divine Sorcerer to be? So without further ado, here are 10 concepts to flavor your character. Starting with the Ichor, you dabble into the hemomancy magic of blood. In practice, maybe witchcraft or voodoo alongside it. When you heal yourself or others, it takes the form of coagulation or physically healing faster. You may also use methods like the Four Humors or bloodletting, a form of archaic and medieval type medicine. Your favored by the gods ability would be like an adrenaline rush, and your wings would be blood wings or the Viking style blood eagle, or you could bloodbend and give yourself your own vitality increase. You could heal your allies at a price, demanding to take some of their blood in exchange for healing them. Or by healing them with this necromantic energy, you are slowly corrupting them with dark magic. This darkness replacing the wounds and the missing skin, but not entirely healing it. But with another blood-related idea, I give you the Troll, who, if you are familiar with D&D lore, they have the uncanny ability to regenerate themselves. The only way to counteract this healing, of course, is to hit the trolls with fire damage. And it might be fun and interesting to have you interact with it the same way, but perhaps you take vials of your own blood, or blood from trolls that you find along the way, in order to heal your party members and yourself with that same method. You could be a full troll yourself, or be half a troll. You could get your blood from some long line of monsters, or you could just be a troll hunter, and that's how you get access to these vials of troll blood. As long as you have this troll blood on hand, you'll be able to heal your party members. Now, there are also some other monsters with regenerative abilities, including the Revenant and Vampire, so being undead. Perhaps your lineage also comes from an undead one, or you somehow have the blood of them. But speaking of vials and potions, there are also a ton of alternative methods to healing just in this real world. So with the alternative Soul Sorcerer, we get to look at things like essential oils, healing stones, and meditation. You also have Reiki, acupuncture, or hypnosis. The question is, what does this alternative healing look like in a magical world? What other alternatives could be out there? Perhaps the Banshee Scream, if exposed to it for a long period of time, creates a frequency that does improve healing. Or you could do some shock therapy from a Behir, or the tears from a beholder acts as one of these essential oils. Alternative healings could also come from false priesthoods and cult manipulation. Perhaps your fellow players just believe that you're healing them, and you're trying to hide the fact that you're not a real cleric, a placebo effect. But speaking of alternative healing, we know that in Dungeons & Dragons, anything alternative to a cleric is anything other than a cleric. But in this case, we'll look at the Paladin Soul Sorcerer, a class that still heals, but instead of getting their magic mainly from a god, they get it from their oaths, a magical resolve that manifests in divine power. So what if your Divine Soul Sorcerer got their divine magic from a similar promise to themselves? But who said paladins that make oaths have to wield a sword? Perhaps this paladin, when they made their oath, they thought that in order to accomplish their goal, they would be better off with a full arsenal of spellcasting. So be a vengeance or conquest or redemption sorcerer, or make an oath entirely your own. But on that same thread though, just think about how other classes or subclasses get their healing and apply it here. Perhaps your Soul Sorcerer gets their magic like the Bard's healing does, or like the Druid's healing from nature. Or you can get it from a pact and a patron like the Celestial Warlock. But even though you have access to the cleric spell list, doesn't mean that you have to invest all of your spell slots in healing magic. With the Undead Soul Sorcerer, you get all of the bad kind of necromancy. Instead of your soul coming from the upper planes or where the gods live, they come from the lower planes or the Shadowfell. Or you just have a talent for the unlife, and you take spells like Inflict Wounds, Animate Dead, or Harm. Perhaps your soul did come straight from a god, but in this case, an evil one, and you're favored by the god's ability, in fact doesn't come from the knowledge of the gods, but knowledge of the past lives or the ghosts that still haunt you. And your healing magic could honestly be reflavored to more of an undead fortitude that a lot of the monster stat blocks get. But if necromancy isn't your thing, what about divination? With the Diviner, you trade out your healing magic for ones that help you see the future. Spells like Augury or Clairvoyance or Scrying. Your blood coming from a long lineage of seers. So now taking the role more of the utility caster, you could also reflavor it to be more of innate psychic ability where you're healing your allies with psionics. In this case, it would be easy to reflavor your flying speed as telekinesis, and your favored by the gods, of course, is just peering slightly into the future to make sure that you're successful. Have fun with it by using tarot cards, crystal balls, star charts, or bone dice. You could also continue to play with this divination idea and instead of just seeing time, you could control it. Retroactively healing your enemies or rewinding the area where a wound was cut to before like it never happened. Kind of like the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, but having the ability to heal and cast divination magic that the Clockwork Soul doesn't have. It may be the difference to fulfill the ideas that you had for your character. After all, Divine Soul Sorcerers get their magic from upper planes, and Mechanus, the plane of law and gears, is one of those upper planes. But now leveling up a character exactly the way you want with the abilities that you want can be understandably hard. Sometimes mechanics even can get in the way of storytelling or the narrative that you want to tell, even with reflavoring. So if you missed it, last week I actually came out with an article/supplement that I'm really actually proud of that helps us change our approach to character progression and allow it to be more narratively satisfying. Instead of your subclass informing how your character progresses, the choices that the character makes instead determines their subclass. You can check out the video on my channel or check out the PDF on my website linked below. But getting back to it, let's say that your soul does come from where the gods live, but instead of where the people go, what about animals? With the all dogs go to heaven, if you know D&D lore, there's a heaven for all animals called the Beastlands. Humanoids actually lucky enough to go to this plane for their afterlife changes into an animal when they enter. So your divine magic's still divine, but at later levels when you get wings, they aren't angel, but they could be bat or eagle. Perhaps even every time that you summon your wings, it could be from a different animal. Gods in this plane are called beast lords instead of gods, and animals that do come here actually reincarnate for multiple lives back on the material plane. Perhaps you were an animal in this previous life and you come back as now a humanoid. In the same vein, the upper and lower planes can often be perceived as the afterlife. But what about for you? It could be the before life. With the fallen angel, you didn't come from a saturated bloodline of celestials, but you are the celestial, an avatar or messenger from some god that you need to accomplish some task before you can return back home. You are a planetar in training or a child of one, in this case being more like a demigod. I think I mentioned a similar idea in a previous cleric video, but I think that it is important to call it out for the sorcerer as well. You could have been an answer to one of your party's prayers, their god sending you. Or you came down as a trial, and in order to take the next step in your ascension, you need to accomplish a task. But like the Beastlands, there is also a type of heaven called Isgard. And in D&D lore, there is the Prime Pantheon, but also lesser gods that inhabit each of these planes. For Beastlands, of course, it's the Beast Lords, but for Isgard, it's the Norse gods. Thor, Odin, and the Valkyrie, for example. You could be Thor, essentially, being cast out by Odin because of some stupid mistake, and now you have to learn a lesson before you can go back home. But with the next idea, you're not the one taking orders, you're the one giving them. With the motivator, you heal the party by increasing their resolve and their overall morale. This is important to mention that hit points do not directly translate to how many times you can get hit with a sword. It's not health, but could also be stamina or willpower. You may see an ally falter, their weapon strikes reflecting doubt or fear. You yell a command, a call to arms, or just a, "You can do this, just keep fighting." Your healing words strengthen their resolve as they renew their determination. In fact, you could really reflavor all of your buffing or support spells this way. And like we mentioned earlier, in this way, you would be getting your magic a lot like the Bard class would be, but just implementing it to Divine Soul mechanics. For the next one, we look to the future and introduce scientific healing. In this case, the nanotech uses nanobots to control the healing of their allies. They may have to inject them with or without their permission, but with a whistle or a click of a button, the little nanobots go to work. But of course, I have to think about what this might look like in a medieval setting, and instead of these metal bugs going around and healing your allies, this could be actual bugs. Bugs from the higher or celestial planes. So celestial bugs that fly around and land on your allies, healing their wounds. And for some reason, you were entrusted with them. But whether it be modern medicine and syringes or magical creatures, remember to find flavor that will really get you excited about your characters even years into play. If you have other reflavors in mind or have played the Divine Sorcerer before, please let me know in the comments below. And if there are other subclasses that I haven't covered yet, let me know the ones that you want to see. Haha! And that is just one thing that you can do with the Hexblade. And if you're here, it means that you're looking into making a character about the Hexblade, and here we're going to be a little bit unorthodox with it. Subverting ideas and really changing what it means to be a Hexblade, reflavoring it to be a character that more fits you. Hopefully giving you inspiration for your Hexblade Warlock character, so that when you summon your specters, it will be a spectacle. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. Hexblades are known to get their magic by making packs from sentient weapons or creatures from the Shadowfell. Their main features include an armor and a shield with their spellcasting, being able to curse enemies and then once killed, turning them into an undead servant. Arguably the most famous Gish characters with both sword and spells. But how can we make your character even more unique? Here we're going to touch on 10 different concepts for your next Hexblade. Starting with the He-Man. Most of you might be familiar with the TV series and the associated toy line. A magical warrior that would unsheath his sword and undergo a magical transformation, imbuing himself with strength, saying the words, "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power."
By the power of Grayskull.
Instead of power from Grayskull, your character would get their power straight from their patron, and instead of getting all muscly, they might take on more of a form of dread, like unto the Undead Warlock. Of course, when you sheathe your sword, you get back to your regular form, and your curses might look more like the Ranger's Hunter's Mark in that sense. And if you've seen previous shows of He-Man, you know that after he transforms, he then points his sword at his cat, Cringer, and makes it transform into Battle Cat. I think that you can flavor your specters in a similar way, pointing your sword at a corpse that you just killed and imbuing them with the power of Grayskull. But speaking of specters, there's a whole lot that you can do with this. One, what they look like, and two, what you're even doing with them. With the Thrallar Hexblade, the reason that you're adventuring are these specters. Fitting in nicely with the Dampire race lineage, you could be a vampire born looking for your thralls. And at the end of the 24-hour period where they're accompanying you, you can send them into a bat to fly away to your home cave. Your patron could also be a kraken, and after you put certain people into servitude, you send them into the ocean to have a long walk back to your patron. And of course, mind flayers, beholders, or anything else that your brain could come up with could also be demanding these specters or thralls. Or you could just be a necromancer who is collecting bodies and sending them back to your home keep and slowly accumulating an undead army. You mark your target with a curse to begin this process. But what if instead of collecting bodies, instead you are collecting souls? With the Reaper Hexblade, your sword is a literal accumulation or spectral energy made from the souls that you vanquished. Perhaps these legions of souls live within you and you push out their ectoplasm into a physical blade. And here's another point of flavor potential. Your weapon. What could it look like? In this case, the process you undergo to channel a new weapon that you wield is you forcing the spirits to take a new shape. A non-consensual spiritual weapon, if you will. Or you can take more of a divine approach, being a messenger from the gods, that your task is to bring souls to the afterlife that is long overdue. You may also have the power to not let spirits move on to the afterlife quite yet and make them a specter for a little bit longer. Make your business their unfinished business, and you won't let them go until they help you. And then of course, your weapon being made out of divine energy, or a sunblade, if you will. Your curse on a creature is an omen to tell them that their judgment day has come, and their designated time of death is, well, in just a few seconds. Some other ways that we can make our weapon unique is creating them out of different elements. With the elemental weapon, you embody one of the elements of nature. You may be ice themed with a long icicle lance, or rock themed where you summon a rock gauntlet. Make a water whip or an invisible blade made of air. And for your specters, you could be infusing their souls into the elements around them or your element, making them elementals. Bind their soul with the air to make an air elemental, or water nearby to give them more of a water weird kind of feel. Once you have your fingers around a soul, who knows what you can do with it. And keeping with the elemental theme, your curses could be making someone overheat or fizzle with a static charge. But another element of nature deserves its very own category: plants. The Spore Hexblade Warlock would make their weapons out of plant matter. Could be a rusted blade covered in algae or a literal blade of grass. Perhaps your whole arm turns into a whip-like vine or a branch, or even like a pea shooter. Interesting point for your Hexblade is they actually don't need to be a melee fighter. With the exception of Staggering Smite and Wrathful Smite, none of your features or spells really require you to be up and close to the person. You can have ranged attacks. So that means guns, crossbows, arrows, you name it. Reflavor these into poisonous cactus needles or bullet seeds. Both your curses and your specters could come from spores that you excrete from yourself, being part plant yourself. These spores grow like fungi in the corpses of your enemies, kind of like zombie ants, how they work. And if you're not familiar with zombie ants, they are absolutely terrifying because the zombie takes over the brain of the ant and keeps it walking after it dies. Might actually be really fun to multi-class into Spore Druid, but while on the gross and disturbing, why don't we talk about making your own body your weapon? With the Abomination, you fuse your weapon into your skin in the process of channeling it. Creating a literal bioweapon, imagine your blade being made from elongated fingernails, or a maul created from your bone. Your curses coming from the fear that you put in other people. This could also be a blade made from your own blood, hardened into a blood red mace. Might actually have to check if it fits well with my Blood Blade Sorcerer that I made. It's on my website, you can check it out in the link below. But also one of my Patreon members, Weaver Atropos, told me on Discord about making this a symbiote. Of course, having a sentient relationship with your armor and your sword, it being your patron, coming out of your body and giving you a weapon that it sees fit in the moment. If you want to be a part of the cult or inner circle where we discuss future ideas, you can also find those links in the description below as well. As for your specters, they could either be blood elementals that you pull out of them once they die, or they could be an extension of your symbiote for a time. But another option for your Hexblade is using the body parts of other creatures, fusing them together to make a weapon. Take one from Godric the Grafted in Elden Ring and graft a wolf's head or drake's head to your arm and make it your weapon. A wolf barking and gnashing its teeth like it's still alive. And another picture that actually comes to mind is a Yagnoloth. Perhaps you've drafted a contract with one of these and your visage becomes like unto it. And just like Yagnoloth, the small arm is for spellcasting and the big arm is for smashing things. But there are also less gross ways of modifying your body, one that takes a level of skill in Artifice. The prosthetic Hexblade is one that takes time to channel and integrate a weapon into a mechanical limb. Perhaps they make it where it can fold in and out like a giant switchblade. Also kind of like the Automel from Full Metal Alchemist. If your DM is really nice, they might even give you a big version of a Swiss Army knife, where you can switch in and out different weapons as you so choose. Also kind of gives the picture of a weaponized Inspector gadget, but talking about ranged weapons like we did before, you can also have a retractable gun. Your specters come from another contraption that you made where you throw it on the person and it becomes like an exoskeleton, or you take the soul itself as a power source like we also talked about and imbue it in a contraption of your own to power it, slowly draining the soul like a battery over the course of the next 24 hours. But if we stretch this Artificer flavor into maybe more of a futuristic setting, we find the malware. And this one might depend a lot on your world setting, but I really like the idea of everyone in the future having body augmentations or implants that connect them to the intranet. And once an individual is disabled, your warlock can place in a virus to give them temporary control over that individual. And your curses could be the start of that hacking process. Double up on some enchantment magic, so to really drive the idea home, and then make your augmentations in your body an extension of your sword. Your sword being an augmentation itself, it could be the source of a malware, and it being a USB that you can literally plug into someone's brain. Your patron possibly being a supercomputer or an AI that you take this magic or abilities from. But of course, this also could be done in a medieval fantasy setting where it's more flavored to be mind controlled, and in order to get this person to be your specter, you need to knock them out and put them in a weakened state in order to take control of their mind. Now for the next idea, it's a little bit more simple, but just as much fun. With the Magician Hexblade, you you can summon and unsummon your sword, but it's really just a sleight of hand as you replace it with a bouquet of flowers. You're really good at hiding things on your person without other people knowing. You could also have a magic wand that turns into a sword, or you pull your sword out of your gullet like a sword swallower. Your curse is reflavored as distracting an audience enough to get the advantage, casting spells out of your top hat or tarot cards, and your specters being more like puppetry or ventriloquy. Cue all of the Weekend at Bernie's references. But what if we didn't have a sword or weapon at all? Or at least a weapon that's a little bit more improvisational. The improv, of course, uses improvised weapons. And of course, doing it in this way, you might need proficiency in improvised weapons, but there are feats for that. I just love the image of a luchador or MMA fighter summoning a chair out of thin air. And now I know that you can't like summon and unsummon a sword strictly in the Hexblade subclass, and it's more of just a Pact of the Blade feature, but when else am I going to talk about this? I can just imagine like an alcoholic who chose a beer mug as their weapon and summons that in opportune times when you're at the bar. Not only for a fight. And the great thing is that because it's magical, it probably won't break when you smash it on somebody's head. And I also thought that it would be kind of fun to have your sword be a type of mimic and becoming something new every time that you pull it out. And it might be entirely up to your DM to choose what that might be. You could pull it out and it be a book, or you pull it out and it's a candelabra, or you pull it out and it's a French baguette. But with all of these ideas, I'm sure you can kind of mix and match and find flavors of your own. To say the least, it's a very popular and very excitable and strong subclass. So making it your own, I feel, is so nice. So you want to play the Order of the Scribe Wizard, but as far as flavor and creativity goes, you're having a real tough time making your character really unique. So I ask you, what if an Eldritch Horror split your consciousness in two? What if you were the wizard's familiar instead? Or you got your own Jarvis? Let's summon your wizardly quill and manifest from your mind new ideas for your next wizard character. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. As you may see, I'm in a new space, so while I get settled in here, enjoy our sponsor for this video. RPG Stories is a new virtual tabletop software featuring a massive world builder that will give you the chance to create your sessions in a fully 3D environment and play with your party. Everything you need all in one software. In addition to its unique VTT features, it will contain 3D assets, heroes, and monsters for all kinds of RPGs, from fantasy, modern, and sci-fi, which you will be able to 3D print as well. RPG Stories is coming to make any game master's life easy when it comes to world building, and every player's dream come true when it comes to tabletop RPG sessions. RPG Stories team wants this to be a community VTT, letting the fans vote for the final features and models that will be implemented in the final version, plus giving all export files for commercial free use, which I particularly like. Go to their Kickstarter pre-launch page linked below and hit the notify me button to get alerted when it goes live September 1st. Thank you RPG Stories for sponsoring this video. Now, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Scribe Wizards are masters at written magics. So much so that they give sentience to their own spellbook to aid them. You start out with a magical quill that lets you copy spells in literal minutes and never requires ink. Your spellbook is also given a consciousness that allows you to switch out damage types of your spells if you have another spell with it. In later levels, you can conjure this consciousness as a separate intangible entity, allowing it to move freely, give off light, telepathically communicate to you, and cast spells through its space as if you were there. As a bonus, you also get to copy down your own spells into spell scrolls and then cast them at a higher level for free. And then as your capstone ability, this awakened spellbook of yours gives you advantage on all Arcana checks for magical lore. And it can sacrifice parts of itself in order to negate any type of damage done to you. You will temporarily lose access to some of your spells, unfortunately, but at least you're alive to cast another one another day. A pretty evocative subclass already, but now that we are familiar with the mechanics of it, let's reflavor it and subvert it into 10 new concepts. Keeping the same mechanics as always, but changing the flavor to stretch your creativity for your next character. First, let's look at the Carver Scribe Wizard. Normally your spellbook is just that, binded leather with papyrus pages. But what if you got really creative? Your spellbook is a collection of bones with spells written on them. But what about sheets of bark or dried flowers within the book? Gemstones where you store spells in them, or thin shale tablets that you carve into, switching your wizard quill with a hammer and a pick. And I actually played that one. Admittedly, I needed a bag of holding for all of those tablets, but it created fun and evocative flavor. Because then with that flavor, you get to think about what your awakened mind would look like. Perhaps your collection of bones compile into a skeleton of a dead monstrosity, or a nature spirit sprung from the dried flowers in the book. Or your shale tablets magically compile into the shape of a stone golem. I've said it before in other videos, but get really creative with your spellbook. It's the main flavor you get as a wizard. But speaking of common stereotypes for the wizard, we look at the familiar. Instead of an awakened spellbook, your source of magic may already be sentient. In fact, your familiar is the smarter one in the relationship. They learn and study spells in their own mind, and without opposable thumbs, they need you to cast it. So they whisper these spells into your ear as you cast them, or telepathically do so. In fact, it is a great excuse to play a dumb wizard for a change. How's that for subversion? But what if we really wanted to subvert it? What if you were the familiar? Your awakened mind is your master that, through a rogue spell, is now trapped their consciousness within you, or their spellbook that you then stole. And while having access to this book, or having them trapped within you, their biology combines with yours. So instead of a raven familiar, you're now a kenku. Or instead of a fish familiar, you're now a lakatha. A cat, a tabaxi, a bunny, a herongon, a turtle, a turtle. You get the picture. In fact, in this subclass, you are able to essentially create a new consciousness every short rest. Normally, this mechanic is to transfer the consciousness that you already have into a new spellbook, but why not create an entirely new one? With the Awakener, magic itself is truly a living entity. Magic is sentient and can think for itself. So, imbue this magic that you have compiled into any inanimate object, kind of like the Awaken spell. What kind of personality would an awakened shrub have? Or an awakened broom? What about a robe or a pair of shoes or a pair of glasses that can now emote and express themselves? Or maybe give some intelligence to small animals. Awaken some complex thinking within a squirrel or a wild pig that happens to be nearby. Whatever it is, there are your new source of magic that feeds your spells. So keep them safe and keep them close. In Dungeons & Dragons, there is also something called living spells, spells that have awakened their own sentience, so just have one of these floating around as your manifested mind. But exploiting another feature of the Scribe Wizard, we can change any spell's damage type to another damage type as long as we have a spell that does have that type already in the same level of the original spell. So if you want to cast Fireball with lightning damage, then you just have to make sure that you have a lightning damage spell of the same level, like Lightning Bolt. This gives us the Elemental Mage. And in my opinion, this is the best way to make an Elementalist or a single type specialist mage in D&D. Now, as a sorcerer, you can get transmuted spell metamagic since the Tasha's book came out, which allows you to use sorcery points to change the damage types of your spells already. But you're limited to all of your sorcery points, which you will probably be using for other purposes anyways, but honestly, you can still make an effective elemental specialist with it. With the wizard I mentioned earlier, with the Shale Magic spellbook, he was my Geomancer, a master of stone magic. All I did was change some of his spells to be bludgeoning damage, and I was pelting everyone with magical stones. And if you find a spell level that lacks a certain damage type spell, perhaps your DM can allow you to homebrew one. And another pro for a Scribe Wizard is that if you want to specialize in non-elemental damage, like Psychic, Force, Radiant, etc., you can. And then make your manifested mind a tiny elemental made out of the damage type you chose, and cast your spells through them. But Sorcerer isn't the only other class that you can draw parallels from. I say take flavor from anywhere and explain your magic similarly. So, with the Echo Mage, your awakened mind looks exactly how your Echo Knight fighter would. In that subclass, your manifested Echo is an alternate version of you in another reality. Take inspiration from Astral Self Monk, where you can conjure an exalted version of yourself through meditation. So flavor your wizard in the same way. Play with the multiverse or astral projection. Now, I actually featured both of these subclasses in other videos, so check out my playlist with all of my subclass flavor explorations. But what about the other subclasses? This conscious spellbook could have an ancestor, like an ancestral guardian barbarian, or be a hunting force like a phantom rogue. Or it could be a celestial conduit for the voice of your god, like a cleric. But maybe taking inspiration from the Artificer class, we can get something unique as well. With the Recorder, you trade your wizard quill with a recorder. Instead of writing things down, you record them on a magical or mechanical device. It is a more modern take on information gathering, of course, and your Awakened Spellbook is just you talking back to yourself. This recorder could even be doing the verbal components for you, or all the components with Master Scrivener feature. Instead of you preparing scrolls, you're preparing glyphed items or spell grenades. Your manifested mind could be a mechanical homunculus or hologram, or take inspiration from Iron Man and have your own Jarvis, especially at later levels when it is helping you recall information, like your own personal Google device. Or don't go too far in the future and have fun with cassette tapes and floppy disks. Put a little modem punk, flashback to my last week's video. Now, some other forms of storing knowledge is a little bit more dangerous. Your spellbook is not only a living consciousness, but also a living creature. We take inspiration from the Harry Potter series with the Book of Monsters. And if you remember from at least the movie, the book has a habit of gnawing at fingers or toes of the attempted reader with an aggressive disposition. A wizard has to rub their fingers along the spine of the book to calm it or stun it, depending on how you look at it, before they can open it safely. So what if your Awakened Spellbook is the same? But not only a book, maybe a scroll that essentially has a long tongue, or flashcards that are a bunch of flat bugs, each with a special way of accessing the spells or content within, so others don't go snooping. In this way, I could also see it be a small hungry mimic, having to feed the amorphous creature in order for it to solidify back into a book form in order for you to read it. And yet, there are still other ways for objects to obtain some sort of sentience, again taking more inspiration from the Harry Potter series with the Horcrux. We deal with pieces of split souls put into an item to achieve immortality. Whether it be a spellbook or whatever creative arcane focus that you use to replace it, it contains a piece of the original owner. Possibly even the Lich BBEG, splitting his soul into multiple phylacteries to better his chance to live forever. You get to converse with this piece of the soul, and who knows, this piece might be the super nice part of them. But with souls attached to an item, we can also contend with ghosts, banshees, poltergeists, that have spiritually anchored themselves to the material world through the item, their unfinished business keeping them behind. It could be an artifact of war where the soldier was killed brutally, a goblet of a killed hag, or maybe even a genie lamp where your manifested mind is a djinn that has very specific parameters before they grant your wishes. Or it could still be a book where the souls of the damned was purposely put there like a Necronomicon, a dark vessel that you have yet to grasp fully and probably shouldn't have. Along those dark lines though, consciousness is a liquid when it comes to the far realm. With the horror, you get Cthulhu and Lovecraftian vibes as you delve into madness. The information in your spellbook or otherwise is too much for your consciousness to handle, causing spurts of insanity. At some point of delving into this alien and unfathomable knowledge of magic, your consciousness breaks and physically splits into two, each now sharing parts of the knowledge but never getting the full picture, only piecing them together enough to cast your aberrant spells, but at continued risk to your mind. And if you actually want to play a wizard with mechanics of madness and the associated power and risks, I got you. Check out the Mad Wizard subclass on my website, linked below. But if not, you can reflavor this one great as well, because this other consciousness could also be a void, an incomprehensible manifestation of your patron that your brain struggles still to comprehend. This giving more warlocky vibes, of course, with a patron, but no deal need be made. But who else than a wizard would find consequences to seeking knowledge where they shouldn't? But there is a difference between warlocky patrons and group patrons. Group patrons were introduced most recently in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything as an individual or organization that unites a party and provides assignments for the party to undertake. Basically a quest giver. This could be a religious institution, an adventurer's guild, a thieves guild, military, magical school, etc. You get the point. But usually including one person that represents the organization to your party. So, let's talk about the Zordon. Now, many of you might get the reference, at least I hope you do, to the floating holographic head from the Power Rangers. He was a galactic mentor wizard that guided the Rangers to fight against the forces of evil. In the same way, your wizard's manifested mind could work similarly. A ghostly head or a scrying head of a patron that is better fit observing from afar. This patron could switch out depending on if the organization had department changes. Other examples in media could be like Jor-El from Superman, dead but still guiding as an AI, the big head from Wizard of Oz that seems a lot more intimidating than they actually are. Or check out this reference poll, Neo Cortex from the Crash Bandicoot. In this instance, the holographic head is the enemy, so maybe your manifested mind is the BBEG scrying in and taunting you, even giving you answers to spells to mock you, test you, or even groom you. But whatever flavor you go with, I hope that you keep your own mind conscious of everything that is possible with this subclass. Let me know what ideas you've had and what other subclasses you would like to see in the comments below. So you want to play an Order of the Lycan Blood Hunter, but with such a unique subclass, how are you going to make it different? What if we subverted the canine countenance into an alien experiment, or twerking as a She-Hulk? Let's transform our thinking with the subclass and make some flavor hybrids to really make your next character concept really one of a kind. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. Continuing with the spooky videos of this month of October, we take a focused look on the Lycan subclass created by Matt Mercer. As far as abilities go in this class, we get to tap into our magic of werewolves. Starting out with heightened senses, you have advantage on things that use your smell, and then being able to transform for a limited time into your werewolf hybrid form. While transformed, you have advantage on strength-based rolls, a bonus to armor class, and a nasty claw attack. But make sure that you don't lose too much health, or you might lose control of your mind and go savage with bloodlust. Lastly, you learn to be able to transform into your werewolf form an unlimited amount of times, as well as get a blood curse of the Howl, which can both frighten and stun your enemies. An incredibly fun and popular subclass. But let's see what happens if we can neuter the wolf's flavor and use just the mechanics to create something else just as evocative. So let's start with the Menagerie, a blood hunter that is a werebeast of any other creature. We have seen were-ravens, were-panthers, and were-hares in books like Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, but also other creatures like octopi, insects, rhinos, or snake-like creatures like the Yuntai, or Yuan-Ti for those who like to keep reminding me in my comments. I will pronounce it how I like, thank you. You could have contracted a lycanthrope of any of the creatures mentioned, of course, but what if you contracted all of them? What if each time you transformed into your hybrid form, it was a different animal? A werehawk one moment and then a werefrog the next. Lycanthropy could be non-specific to any one beast in your world, or it could just come from the last beast that you saw or touched. If you want to turn into a were-elk, well, you will have to touch one first. But speaking of all these beasts, let's bring up the other animal transformationist, the Druid. Sure, you can flavor your lycanthropy as a wild shape, but Druids are so much more than that. Your transformation is an elemental transformation, taking on a bark skin or a stone skin to attack as an agent of nature. Or you take on other elements of nature around you, like the Circle of Land Druid. Or your transformation could be taking on like the starry forms of the Circle of Stars Druid. Be sure to give yourself the Rite of the Flame, imbuing your claws with fire damage to be reminiscent of the Wildfire Druid. You are basically the All Druid at this point. Your blood curses taking the form of vines, holding your enemy down or surrounding them in thorns to keep them from multi-attacking. I also picture the Bloodlust almost being like those mad trees from the Wizard of Oz throwing apples because they don't like to be touched. Maybe you're just a little protective, but why stop at just normal beasts and plants with the monstrosity? You extend beyond the beast type creatures and instead transform into creatures like the Owl Bear, or a Displacer Beast, a Kruthic, an Armvorax, a Bahir, a Bullet, Purple Worm, Grey Render, the Nightmare Beast, a Strigoi, a Tarask, a Warg, or a Yeti. All to which you could have a partial transformation into. Perhaps you were cursed with it, or your DNA was spliced with them, their soul is stuck within you, or a wizard transmuter had a little too much fun with their experiments. Heck, maybe you have the blood of giants and can grow your size through runic magic as your transformation. Or a fey creature stuck in this human form and can only show their true form for limited times. Or you have fiendish blood and your skin turns red and you grow horns and a tail in more of a devilish transformation. You could have quite literally given this devil your soul so they take over when necessary. Which brings us to another creature type that deserves a category all on its own, the dragon. Transform into your favorite chromatic, metallic, or gemstone dragons, reflavoring your blood curses as unnerving breaths or psionic capabilities. You could even multi-class with an Ascendant Dragon Monk or Drake Warden Ranger. This could have been a draconic gift outline in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, gifted to you when you defeat a dragon, or the ghost of the dragon still within you. Or be a regular dragonborn unleashing the dragon within. Your bloodlust also coming in the form of draconic greed, striving to take the gold or magic items off of your fellow players. Unfortunately, you still won't be able to fly, but you can get that elsewhere. With your blood rights or imbuing your weapons with elemental magic, take from a single dragon type you wish, or be a herald of Tiamat herself and switch between any color of dragon with all of the damage types. And while we're on a roll, let's look at the Thrall, one that takes inspiration from the undead creature type. Race, banshees, zombies, shadows, skeletons, ghosts, liches, and vampires. Your transformation is extending your teeth or claws as a Dhampir, or even a bat-like transformation. With ghost-like creatures, you can go partially ethereal, or their form sits atop yours as an ancestor or guardian angel, or in a loud possession that attunes to your senses. Your bloodlust instead is losing yourself completely to this possession. Your whole form could turn dark like a shadow, or take inspiration from the undead warlock's form of dread to flavor your transformation similarly. Perhaps it's your patron itself that is possessing you. But by the way, you don't need to be a warlock to make a pact with a patron. But now let's talk about one more type of creature, the aberration. Mostly known for mind flayers and aboleths, you may also have sloths, starspawn beholders, cosmic horrors. Your transformation could be partial ceremorphosis, or your blood curses come from eye stalks off of your back. This could have been more of a forceful transformation from a patron pact, or you spent way too much time exposed to the horrors of the far realm in some way. Or give yourself an alien symbiote and your transformation is them taking over. But creatures aside, this is just your chance for intense body horror. Trigger warning now with this stuff. But as you transform, your skin boils, pusses, warps, stretches, and turns inside out, creating gaping wounds and turning your inner organs into outer weapons. But speaking of all of this horror, if you're looking for more inspiration and flavor to prepare for your spooky games this month, as I've mentioned in all of my other videos, check out this month's issue of my Higher Power magazine. This month being all about blood and brains, exploration of characters based on different undead monsters, and how to make them new, unique, and evocative to terrify your players with the unknown. If you wish to grab a copy, all my patrons get a new issue every month, and if you become a patron now, you will get last month's issue for free. Otherwise, you can still get them on my website, all linked below. Either way, it helps support this channel so I continue to make videos like this. I couldn't do it without you guys, really. I couldn't. Thank you. So now we get to talk about one of my other favorite topics, superheroes. With the Hulk, your transformation is one of alchemical or scientific means. Your muscles growing in size, your skin changing in color, your emotions becoming heightened in a way that it becomes uncontrollable. You could be fueling these transformations through consumables or syringes, or be a result of magical gamma radiation or dark energies. There are tons of different kinds of Hulks to take inspiration from. Even the Grey Hulk transforms when the sun goes down. Kind of like a werewolf. Just ask yourself what kind of effects different concoctions and elixirs might do to you. Maybe even like Shimmer from the Arcane series. But speaking of another superhero, the transformation is relatively a little more subtle. The Wolverine. In his case, claws of metal unsheath through his skin. So what if your own weapon is inside of you? You eject this weapon in some form of metallic blades, bones, glass, or crystals meant to do harm and maim. How did you come across this ability? How are these things implanted within you? How could you even combine some transmutation to make your limb become part of your weapon? I can also think of a similar superhero by the name of the Absorbing Man becoming a weapon you touch or hold, even your body assuming that element as well. What other superheroes or mutants could you pull inspiration from? But what if you were just a normal dude? How would you translate the abilities then? And make it equally unique, of course. Well, with the Unarmed Fighter, we take the archetypes of the monk and the barbarian. Firstly, the monk transforms by going into a special fighting stance or tapping into their ki, and then influencing their ki instead of blood magic. Not literally, because you don't have ki as a blood hunter, this is flavor, it's allowed. Your bloodlust could be almost losing yourself to your trance and not being aware of your surroundings. You could even be an elemental monk in that way, in activating different kinds of blood rites. In the barbarian department, the elemental part could be much like the Storm Herald subclass, the transformation being your rage, and of course your blood magic instead being causing fear and hesitation in your enemies. But what about the magic side of things? Instead of a physical transformation, you activate the Blade Song, much like the Blade Singer Wizard, where their physical attacks are empowered by their magic. Make it fun as a mage with brass knuckles or clawed gloves. Your transformation is just an arcane boon, but you can also flavor it as a divine boon coming from a god, more like your clerics or paladins. Your physical attacks imbued with holy light. Entering bloodlust is your body not being able to handle all of that holy light within you. Normally, the only weapon right that deals radiant damage is given to the Ghost Slayer subclass, but for flavor, I would allow a trade with another one that they may have. Talk with your DM, of course, if you want to do something like that. In fact, talk to them about any possibility or character concept. Hopefully they will want to cultivate that creativity and provide an interesting and tailored experience for everyone. So what do your transformations look like? Tell me about your characters in the comments below.